Well, happy Thursday, Smite fans, and welcome back to another week of Smite Esports. We're going to be kicking things off today with the Smite Challenger Circuit and going to be starting over in the European region for the first half of the day and then moving back over to the North American side of things. So if you're all about Smite Challenger Circuit, and you should be because this is the final week of play for these SCC teams before they take a little bit of a break, and then we'll see them back in December when it comes down to their qualifier tournament. So make sure that you are tuning in because we got some really big sets, and we're starting off with a hot one today. Hex Mambo and Highland Ravens to kick off the day. Gonna be a fun one. It's a good thing I got a good partner with me because I'm J-Mac. I got Mifflin joining me on the desk to help me get through this first little bit.
Yeah, excited for this one, man. Anytime a streak gets broken, be it a loss streak or, in this case, a win streak for both of these teams, I'm all about it. Someone's got to take an L. First one of the phase for either one of the teams that loses in the first set, but either way, an L is an L, and I love that.
Yeah, both these teams are currently sitting at 4-0, but this isn't the only set they're going to be watching today. We got 4 full sets, so let's take a look at the schedule, at least for our first couple for the European, and then for the NA on the second half of the day. So today will be Hex Mambo, Highland Ravens, and the Aru Scorpions and Niflheim Wargs. And then for the second half of the day, Athenian Sages, Anansi Weavers, and Shibalba Storm and Yomi Tanuki to round out the day. Now, those are the only matches that we're going to be broadcasting for ourselves. We're going to have the other 2 of those matchups between EU and NA broadcasts on Saturday and Sunday with our amateur scene team, so make sure that you're tuning in post-SPL to watch those ones. But as you said, Mifflin, 4-0 for both the Hex Mambo and the Highland Ravens. Only one of those teams can come out the victor. Only one of those can be crowned the Phase 3, at least regular season champions. We'll have to see if that ends up being the Mambo or the Ravens.
Yeah, I really am excited for this one. I think it's a match that's been really highly anticipated for the fans at home. The Highland Ravens got some phenomenal talent behind them. King Kenneth, obviously, on that squad. Hex Mambo, similarly, a lot of world champion talent there. So this is one of the highest quality matchups we can bring from the SCC.
Then Aru Scorpions and Niflheim Wargs, that second match could be a big potential seeding implication there because Scorpions are only at 2-2, Wargs are at 1-3. A win by the Wargs could bump them up a couple of places in those standings as they start moving closer towards that playoff round. So all these matchups very important for some of these teams out there. We'll make it at least a quick little note out there for Team Hex Mambo. Deathwalker will not be taking part in today's games as he is serving a 7-day in-game suspension. That's the words I'm looking for. So will not be taking part in today's matchup. So instead, it will now be Zeros moving over into the solo lane, and Sap7, who we haven't seen in a little while. It's been since, I believe, Phase 2 that he's had a chance to come out here and shine, will instead be playing for the mid lane on the side of Hex Mambo.
Yeah, I wonder how that makes Hex Mambo's draft start to look, right? Zero is one of the traditional mage players, still going towards things like the Thoth. Maybe the patented Zero's Chang'e could make an appearance in the solo lane. He's been playing in mid. Feels like Chang'e probably a little bit better suited to the solo, so potentially an avenue in there for the Hex Mambo, but certainly not an ideal situation for them lined up against the Ravens.
Yeah, especially when you are fighting for that undefeated spot, that number 1 seed. Always want to make sure you're trying to fight it over at full strength, but Hex Mambo, the rest of their roster, definitely able to help step up and give them a hand in that regard. Johnny over into the jungle has always been a power carry for this team. E-Chrome in the dual lane and Trix Tank as well. Very often that we have to talk about Trix Tank, his god pool, just how flexible he is there, and also just how winning of a player he is in general. It's very hard for us to go through his spreadsheet of gods that he has played and find anything that's under like a 60% win rate at this point. I mean, this duo lane of Hex Mambo is always one to step up whenever they're needed.
Yeah, and I like what the duo lane of Hex Mambo allows for the rest of the team. We generally see Zeros play these slower meta picks that need a little bit of itemization before they can start to find some pressure. Johnny's been doing a little bit of the same, so in situations like that where your jungler and your mid lane are a bit relegated to playing towards that 15-20 minute mark, we would say, well, then maybe Hex Mambo is a slower paced team, but because they draft highly aggressive side lanes, it kind of allows that space on the map to just farm up and outscale a little bit faster than what we've seen from everybody else. Answers to that style of play is match pressure, right? But good luck doing it against a star-studded roster like the Mambo.
Yeah, at least for Sap7 kind of filling in for Zeros' shoes into the mid lane spot there, Zeros moving over into solo. Sap7 plays a lot of very similar gods, especially, we just saw the Baba Yaga. That's something that Zeros has gone to time and time again throughout Phase 2 and Phase 2 Masters and even in Phase 3. So it feels like at least in the middle it'll be a bit of a slot. So I think the curiosity really does come to where is Zeros going to put his priority picks over into that solo lane. Well, lining up against him is the Highland Ravens. This is also a very star-studded roster of players. Kana, Adapting, Angry, Eye Silence, Vaporish Coast, to name the roster out there. Very difficult team to kind of have to play at a little bit of a deficit this time around, especially with how well Adapting has been readapting to his style of play and been able to come back through ever since phase number 2. Angry over in the mid lane is definitely one of the better mid laners to have a try and match up against for SAP 7. So it's going to be a little bit difficult in that mid lane matchup, I think specifically more than anything for these teams.
Yeah, the mid lane, I think curious, right? Hex Mambo, of course, playing with someone that they haven't had too much experience. SAP 7 filling in for them. But if I had to guess where this set is going to be, I suppose decided, is likely the dual lane. Vaporish Coast and Eye Silence have got the potential to line up against Echrome and Trix Tank. So with both of these teams playing highly aggressive dual lane styles, it could just be which one of these squads establishes a lead first. If Vaporish Coast gets an aggressive pick, finds a first blood, I'd be hard-pressed to imagine that he drops a lead like that, even against such a pedigreed player like Echrome. Silence, I suppose, probably has a bit of his work cut out for him trying to keep up with Trix Tank on the map. That is Trix Tank being one of the most aggressive supports that is willing to spread his wealth and throw around his weight, diving towers at level 3, level 4. Silenced generally likes to play a bit more of the standard support style picks, things like the Ganesh, the Khepri comes to mind as well. So I am curious to see how pacing starts to develop between these two teams. When we talk about the EU SEC as a whole, it is a slightly slower pace, but we always put the asterisk. Well, except for Hex Mambo. They like to get aggressive early. Well, except for the Highland Ravens when they get things rolling. So I am curious. Is it going to go back to a slower, more standard European pace, or are these guys going to come out swinging?
Yeah, and it really comes down to, I think, a couple of the players on the teams, especially when we talk about like former SPL players, and especially ones that had to play in recent years who have had to adapt to that more North American style of play. Players like Adapting, like Trix Tank, like Zeros and Johnny over on that squad. So they're very familiar with being able to get down and get dirty a little bit earlier on. So, and you have been able to see that kind of trickle down into their gameplay and in their play styles a little bit through. So I think it's been a while since we've had two teams actually come up 4-0 at the end of a phase, or even come this close in standings at the end. So I think this is going to be a very big matchup for these two teams. It'll give us a really good indication kind of where some of the EU players stand out there. Because for a while, it did kind of feel like Hex Mambo was just the clear-cut best team over in the European region. But with the bump up of the Highland Ravens, we might see a new winner come out here in Phase 3.
Yeah, in phases of past, there almost felt like there were 3 tiers in the EU SECs. Hex Mambo, the Highland Ravens, everybody else, right? Now with both of them sitting undefeated, I'm sure the Highland Ravens would like to jump up, at least in the external tier list, be it on Reddit or here on the casting team. So you got to start somewhere, right? It's always about how you're able to draft, what you're looking to itemize towards, what you're looking to actually build around. I think we'll get a good idea of the pacing of these games based on the picks.
The good thing is we can jump right into the picks advance for game number 1 between the Highland Ravens and Hex Mambo. So Hex Mambo going into that second slot means they're going to get a couple of big picks depending on what ends up coming out after the banning phase. We know that Heimdall is always a staple ban when it comes to EU. You never want to give either of the EU hunters one of those picks, as it seems to just be their go-to at this point. Seeing Ymir banned away, that's kind of been one of the #1 supports that have come around as of recent times. The amount of pressure he's able to get, especially when it comes down to Interceptor. I mean, that always ends up being such a massive factor over there. And then the Vulcan and the tier. Maybe a little curious to see the tier banned away there.
Mambo's used to playing around the tier, okay? So even with Deathwalker out, I'm sure Zeros would have been willing to go towards that pick, having had an opportunity to see it as often as he has. So if the Ravens had a strategy coming into this week, and maybe even changes outside of control the Mambo could have reflected in P's and B's, it's right to stick with your plan, and I like what we've seen from the Ravens. Get themselves something that they're comfortable with, and still remove some of the standards from Mambo.
So Ymir, Tyr, and Cupid, and that'll be a Chernobog first pick for the Ravens, a Vulcan, Guan Yu, and Cthulhu ban, with at least a Ratatosker, which has been a very powerful component for Adapting and the Highland Ravens, so making sure to take that one away, put it over into the hands of Johnny. And then we were talking about traditional mages. Well, Hades is still technically a mage. We've seen him in the mid lane a little bit, and I'll be seeing him to go over to Zeros in the solo lane over here for Hex Mambo.
That's a very strong top 2 for Mambo. I mean, Hades has just been tons of pressure, regardless if that is headed to the solo lane, and you have to imagine it is. It's one that Zeros is very comfortable playing. He's been around the scene for a very, very long time, and is very capable of playing a high burst, high risk mage like Hades. Ratatasker giving you that global presence as well means that if Hades establishes a lead, Ratatasker is going to be there to make sure that that kill does at least go through, even if you're able to make it back to your own tower. Tiamat, though, a little bit curious. I know Zeros is going to play that pick, but with SAP 7 on it, it might struggle a little bit in that mid 3v3 or even the mid 2v2 when the junglers start to rotate through. It's a pick that generally needs a couple of levels. That Primordial Onslaught's around the third level of that ability. We can start clearing out the waves a little bit more consistently, where it's a better poke tool. Until then, Tiamat kind of just needs to rest and wait for a couple items, wait for a couple levels, then you can start to get involved.
That sometimes does end up coming down to the playstyle of some of these teams out there. So along with the Tiamat, an Amaterasu and a Khepri were picked up on the opposite side. So we have the dual lane of the Ravens with Chernobog and Khepri, solo lane for the Amaterasu over there. As the bans roll through, Hun Bats and Baba Yaga ban. Baba, always a standard pick for these EU mid laners, and then Terra and Ganesh on the opposite side. And then, well, Trixtank goes to one of his most successful support picks. This Sobek has been giving him a lot of wins. If I'm not mistaken, I believe he's somewhere around 70 games played and over an 80% win rate on this god.
Tons of pressure. He's got the eye of the initiator. He knows where he needs to go. He knows what he needs to lock down, and he does it very well, but it's getting a little bit cold in here, didn't it? That's adapting Thor. That's not your run-of-the-mill Thor. That's not the Joe Schmo from down the street locking in the God of Thunder. That is adapting. He's got a skin named after him. It's Righteous Hammer. We call it the adapting skin for a reason. I'm excited to see this one. Clearly, the Ravens bringing out some pressure. And Thor is a pick that used to be more in line with Adapting's playstyle back in the original SPL days. And in his first couple of seasons, he was one of the more aggressive players in the jungle. Since then, became a little bit more passive, started to farm some more. If he's looking to set pace early, getting back to one of his old classics, I'm excited to see it.
Well, we'll see who can come out on top for game number 1 between the Highland Ravens and Hex Mambo. The battle for the number 1 seed, the battle to be the only team remaining with an undefeated record. Who will it be? We'll have to find out at the end of this best of 3 set, as we do get Adapting back on his signature pick. I mean, you go back to the original days of SPL, the Season 2s, the Season 3s, and even sometimes earlier on than that, Adapting has always gone to this pick whenever his teams needed. He's won MVP because of it. That's why we also see so many skins like that. I think he's even got an emote that's been made after that one there. So no surprise to see the King back on his big pick.
Yeah, but this is a different version of Thor. I'd argue a better version of Thor than what he used to play. Damage back on the wall, stun still there. Ultimate has had a buff since then. The third ability, Berserker's Barrage, a little bit different as well. But what really makes Thor meta right now is the ability to proc item effects on literally every single one of his abilities. Things like Crusher find a whole lot of value when you're able to proc it 4 times in a team fight, right? So I'll be keeping my eyes on Adapting. Wouldn't be surprised to see him go towards just a standard start. Jotun's in that first slot. You really want access to the Anvil of Dawn just about at every single opportunity. If a fight's happening, you want that Thor to be able to join it at a moment's notice. But either way, I think he is definitely in a position where he could dictate the pace of this game, especially around individual picks of Hex Mambo. I'm looking at E-Chrome as a great target for this Thor, even Trixtank to a certain extent. We had the opportunity to talk to some of the supports recently during the content days, the SPL guys, and they had said, look, support's really strong right now. It's impossible to kill them if they've got Meditation and Mail of Renewal, but no Meditation for Trixtank, and you got to wait a little while on that Mail Renewal. So the second Adapting ticks over to 5 could make it easy to lock down this Sobek.
Trixtank, easy pluck on a silence, but still very tanky and very healthy on this Khepri early on. Some quick pressure from Angry and Adapting. This Yu Huang is something that, for a little while, we were seeing quite a few bans thrown its way in the EU scene. Even over in NA, we've been seeing some bans towards it. Haven't seen very much of Yu Huang ever since kind of his immediate initial rise back in Phase 2, whenever he got really, really popular for just about everybody, was seen in almost every game. But we're starting to see him kind of trickle his way back here in Phase number 3, especially with some of these SCC mid laners.
Yeah, I think that Yu Huang in particular is probably pretty decent into the European SCC meta, because we do see a lot of the slower picks. Yu Huang, maybe not the fastest, he's not bringing the same level of pressure as a Morrigan or a Vulcan or an AMC, but he's certainly out-pressuring a Tiamat, and he certainly has still got a phenomenal late game, and is very, very good in the team fight. If your Yu Huang makes its way all the way to level 20 without getting punished too hard, you've still got amazing DPS, you're a ranged nuker, you can control space a little bit with the Phoenix Fire, but it's that Dueling Dragons initiation that really just brings them a little bit above the rest of the pack. It's the ability to have an initiation that is non-committal, one that is pretty hard to predict, comes out very quickly, and it's one that can burn some beads and make way for Eye Silence to use the Abduct, or make way for Adapting to land with that Anvil of Dawn and actually go for the full combo. So I like what Yu Huang brings to this roster. And it's a draft really that isn't lacking for CC. I think the Highland Ravens have got plenty of avenues to put pressure on the ultimates of Hex Mambo or the beads.
Adapting, just waiting for that moment when we see him tick over to level 5 to see where he puts that initial presence on the map, which lane he kind of throws some of that damage out there, tries to get those beads. Sap7 very low on mana at the moment on the Tiamat, struggling to keep up with the clear that this Yu-Wong has from Angry. And I think it'll be a little while before we see Sap7 really try and get involved in some of these matchups. As you mentioned, few items until Tiamat's damage really comes online, quite a few levels. But it might even get quiet in that mid lane, because that's something that mid laners also talk about. Is Yu-Wong, great first few levels, kind of struggling mid game, late game. So I think that's where we're going to see maybe a lot of the potential power spikes out there for these ones. So for Adapting and Johnny, kind of where do you think their attention goes to on these two picks? I mean, they're so similar in playstyle.
Yeah, Ratatasker, I think, is going to have a little bit more difficulty finding a lane that he's willing to gank. Normally, I'd say just go jump on the Chernobog, but you don't want to play around a death immune ultimate, and Eye Silence hovering around the duo lane means the second Scarab's Blessing is available. Best case scenario for Johnny in a gank of the duo is that he gets the Khepri ultimate. If Trix and E-Chrome are able to force it out beforehand, of course you want Johnny rotating all the way over to the long lane. Otherwise, head to mid. We've talked ad nauseum about how annoying it is to gank a Yu-Wong. Floats into the air, CC immunity there, removes himself from the playfield for what feels like an eternity. Once he lands, CC immunity the ultimate, and we're not even talking about the relics just yet. So a very, very safe mid laner. Kana in the solo on this Amaterasu, tons of CC immunity as well. Just a very unfun lineup for a jungler.
Fun fully. Beads now gone from Angry, and a lot to try and grab him. But there's that Celestial Flight that you were mentioning that makes it so difficult to gank them, even through one little wall and the extra little bit. Not quite enough to get Angry out. Did have to expend the beads after Trixtank finds a nice little pluck at the tail end of that fight. Trixtank did have to use his blink to get in there. Will use a pluck on the Silence. That's a level 5 Khepri. Gonna be difficult to kill Eye Silence at this point.
Yeah, good luck. And you gotta kill him twice, by the way. He's got Scarab's Blessing available to him now. But getting the beads off of Angry, I think, is massive for Hex Mambo. Should allow you to play aggressively around that red buff if you're able to get timer on it. Unfortunately, Mambo does not have that as of now, so it seems like Angry should be able to solo farm it himself. But now the only CC immunity you're really concerned about is that ultimate from Angry. Could still predictably use the float from Yu-Hong to avoid a dunk from Johnny, but the chase down potential immediately afterwards still there. You gotta do something while those resources are burnt. You've got 2 minutes now until that beads is back and available for Angry. Got to do something while they're down. I'd like to see Johnny make the rotation, maybe a pluck from Trixtank, just put some pressure on this pick, stagger his CC immunity. If the beads are going to come back up, at least get the dueling dragons off them.
It is another 90 seconds until those are back up. So strike while the iron's hot, and Adapting's going to take that to heart. Will immediately dunk in on towards Johnny, finds the stun, the double wall tap after, and it's first blood. Going to the Highland Ravens, maybe a little more if Sap7 had stepped a little bit further forward. The Highland Ravens on the board early.
That's tough, man. And that's the risk you run when you play blink junglers. If you don't have the beads against these high CC combos like the Thor dunk combo, you're just going to lose the majority of your HP there. We've seen this a couple of times from Hex Mambo and from the Highland Ravens of the past. When that first rotation of Greater Scorpion spawns up, they'll threaten their own, realize, oh, they're also doing it on the other side. Maybe we can go get involved in the fight. And it's exactly what happens here. Adapting makes it look so simple. But Johnny's been doing a good job of farming up until this point, so won't fall too far behind.
Zeros use the beads.
Yikes.
The ultimate, but that's not going to do very much for him. And now this Hades, without both forms of his safety, Adapting's ultimate going to come up very shortly. Could be a nice and easy rotation for the store back to solo lane, but 2 kills for the Ravens, both of them now on Adapting.
Yeah, Zero's using the leap there is just a bit dangerous. You got to realize, and it comes with experience in the role, and Zero's hasn't been playing solo for a while now. When your blue buff is up, the enemy blue buff is also up, and the jungler is probably there. So leaping so close to the enemy blue makes it so simple for Adapting to just walk on up and line up yet another kill. A Thor with a lead is a very scary thing. Lead not massive as of now, but it's starting to build up, and Thor, generally around level 10, 11, 12, can start to really get aggressive, really start to throw around that weight. It's a tough situation to find yourself in as a Mambo member.
Beads are now back up for Angry, so that window of opportunity for Johnny and the rest of Hex Mambo has kind of closed itself. Up in the sky is adapting. I don't think he's got the distance to get over to Trick, so he'll dunk right back down into the red buff, drop that one for Angry, and continue his farm game. Could have been potential gank opportunity if Trickstank stuck around just a little bit longer, maybe stepped a little bit further forward, but just a little too far out of range for adapting to catch in with that ult.
Worth noting, though, that Trickstank did not actually go for Male Renewal in that first slot. Instead, it's the Gauntlet of Thebes, already halfway to full stack, so that defense will be serving him very shortly. But until then, a wall from adapting and a little bit of follow-up from Vaporish Coast, even a dive potential with Eye Silence on that side of the map, just giving you that safety blanket that is Scarab's Blessing, could make it difficult for Trickstank to survive.
Trickstank does find the Blink Pluck. Vaporish Coast up in the sky. Where will he go? Will he be right back down? No, it's all the way to the opposite side to help out because Zeros is being bullied by Kana behind the tier 1 tower, but silenced just barely. Able to get away. Snipes in the sky. Needs the third shot just a little bit off the mark by E-Chrome. And now Zero's still in danger from Kana. Blink in from Johnny to get some help to try and take down Coast, but Coast is still living through. Up onto the tree goes Johnny, but adapting, able to find one more on a killing spree for himself, and Johnny not willing to dive into 3. So it's just a pick for the Ravens.
Yeah, I agree with that decision from Johnny. You're not guaranteed to get the kill there. If it were adapting low, take the bounty, but because it was Vaporish Coast, who's sitting at 0-0-1, I'm thinking Johnny probably values his life a little bit more so, the ability to back up and farm up on your own. But that still is another tough situation where it feels like finally Hex Mambo finds a little bit of footing on the map. They get aggressive on the duo side. Vaporish Coast caught out, Silence in some trouble. Vaporish Coast just ults the opposite side and says, hey, look, Zeros has been getting accosted the entire time. I'm just going to go ahead and contribute to that instead of losing a fight on my side of the map. And it looks good yet again for the Highland Ravens.
3 kills for adapting, 3 assists for Kana, which has allowed him to get a little bit of an extra bit of lead over on that solo lane. Flight down from Angry. Trickstank walked up, put a little bit of pressure in that regard, and then a D-ward on the left side to give this Yuwong a little bit of extra safety. Adapting, not with as much of a lead as you would think, though. I mean, 3 kills onto a Thor, barely even, I can't even say a full item up, hasn't had a chance to go back to base yet to finish out that mace, but doesn't really have the significant lead you would think with a Thor that's 3-0.
Yeah, that lead has found itself elsewhere. It's in the soul lane, nearly a level and a half, 2 levels for Kana over Zeros. Adapting's been spending a lot of time getting active in these lanes, getting active in the fights. We saw him poke his head in the duo a couple of times around mid, solo twice now. Whereas for the most part, Johnny has been playing a reactive style and only really rotating to these engagements after he's cleared out his own jungle. So the fact that adapting and getting so active is even, what, 800 gold ahead? I'd argue is very good.
A wall from adapting actually catches Trickstank on the wrong side there. Zeros goes in, finds the ult, gets the beads away. Some decent damage out of Angry, but all that healing from Zeros now up into the sky.
Whoa.
Is adapting, dunks down, finds a few, Silence slows, Silence still able to get away for a moment, but the Dark does catch him, and Vaporish Coast joining the fight. Makes it a very uneven trade, but E-Chrome finds a snipe to make it a 2-for-3 trade out.
E-Chrome needed to be there. If adapting walks out alive, the Highland Ravens got away with just banditry in broad daylight. E-Chrome put some damage into Angry. Keep your eyes on Johnny. Could dive here. Like what we saw from Coast, though. Had Johnny been allowed to take a couple more steps forward, the Blink into Acorn combo likely would have just finished off Angry or at least got those beads. So Vaporish Coast steps forward and says, hey, if you want to get into Blink range, you're going to have to get through these autos. So best of luck. And Johnny just folds him. He says, all right, I'm not going to be able to dive here. I don't want to risk it. That was a good fight for us. Finally, let's go ahead and take this small win and allow E-Chrome to start doing some of the heavy lifting. Now, having killed adapting, has a massive lead.
Kana, middle of 2, now 3 with the Minotaur jumping in. But he'll be just fine. Not any real follow. Trickstank not willing to commit the pluck, or maybe had already used it just prior to try and lock Kana down. But I mean, you want to talk about significant leads. What was a 1.5 to 2 is now a 4-level deficit in the solo lane. Kana coming up in that fight to find himself 2-0 and 4. And Zeros not able to find the totem, now being chased out, adapting here. And an ultimate from Kana means that Zeros will likely go down. Beads are gone, wall doesn't catch him in time, spin doesn't matter, and the silence after won't help out. It's a 4th kill up for adapting.
Man, that is a tough situation for Zero. He whiffs Devour Souls on Totem Aku. That thing doesn't move. He just wasn't quite in range there. Didn't have the heal to use on Wave either, so easy pickup. Loses the beads. Yeah.
Tough.
Zeros' game, and I will not mince words here, Zeros' game is over. He is no longer a factor on the map. And he's gone for a slow build at that. My man hasn't stacked up anything.
Now, adapting in the sky. But it doesn't look like the rest of the Ravens want to commit to that, so he'll dunk over to Pyromancer instead. And the Highland Ravens can continue to push their lead. What was sitting at 3,500 is now exploded up to over 4,000 gold in the lead for the Highland Ravens. Majority of that coming from that solo lane gap, the solo lane chasm that's been developed over there. Because, I mean, as you're right, 51 stacks on Book of Thoth, only 10 on Warlock Staff. Meanwhile, Kana's just W-King at Zeros. Every opportunity that he's been given, Kana's just going for the fight. I mean, Zeros is so far behind at this point.
And it's too late into the build for Zeros to shift it up, right? You could say, well, maybe he just goes full tank and then utilizes the DR that he gets inside a Pillar of Agony. Yeah, level 11, 2 items deep, both stacking items, both incredibly expensive. It's a little too late to pivot there. And defense is a little bit less valuable from behind than it is from ahead. So expect Zeros to stick with the tried and true standard. Wouldn't be surprised to see a Polynomicon or just some standard damage items of Bancrofts in this next slot. Hex Mambo got to do something. They're looking at the gold.
And Hex Mambo do get the Gold Fury, adapting. Not able to steal that one away with the Wall Hammer combo, but at least able to show some presence towards that side of the map. So Hex Mambo, their fight back, their answer to this pressure has been to at least take one neutral objective off the map. And that's at least been able to drop the gold down by about 1,000 to kind of give themselves a little bit of alleviation there. So Hex Mambo still with some fight, but it's going to be a while before they're really able to get much of a team fight through, because it just feels like they need to wait for Zeros to hit that level 20 and get some more items up.
Yeah, they need Zeros to be one of the primary initiators for Hex Mambo. You can have a Sobek pluck every single time, but iRaffer famously said, hey, if I pluck somebody in the late game and they've got beads, I just die. And Trixtank is not immune to that either, as Johnny may get caught out here. Wall a little off the mark from adapting, so good dart escape path for the Ratatasker. So when you look at the rest of Hex Mambo's draft, who else can initiate these fights? Do you want Johnny dunking in first? Against how much DPS and CC is on the side of the Ravens, I'm not particularly sure that I would love to see that from them. You really need it to be like Blink Ultimate Engage from Zeros or Blink Fear to burn off some of those relics to make it a little bit easier for Johnny or for Trixtank to start up some of these fights. And, well, 4 levels down, Zeros doesn't really have that as an opportunity either. So for now, Hex Mambo, I think, best served by trying to move the game as far away from the soul lane as possible.
Silence finds a double root and a dash out. Damage from Echrome starting to really stack up. And Kana will just keep Zeros pushed to the tier 2 tower. Zeros can't even really fight for his blue buff at this point. Kana's just keeping this one dialed in consistently. Not even sure Zeros is going to be able to grab that one. Does. Manages to secure it, but he's being slowly stabbed multiple times by Kana, keeping that health bar down. And this is about as far up as we've seen Zeros be able to walk in the last few minutes.
Yeah, I'm waiting for Kana to start rotating out of this lane. At this point, you're kicking a dead horse, man. There's no reason to sit on tier 2 tower line. You're not generating enough threat that Johnny's been forced to rotate. So instead, spread that wealth. I'm sure that Highland Ravens would have loved to push the pressure around that Gold Fury, so it's a great opportunity, a great pickup from Hex Mom to remove that from the map. But you can still pressure a tier 1 mid tower, especially with the leads that you're playing with on map. Anything that can control Hex Mambo's rotations is exactly what the Highland Ravens need to do. So if Kana can't accomplish much by sitting on a tier 2 in solo, if he just goes to sit on tier 1 in mid, someone's going to have to respond, or Hex Mambo lose their mid tower. If you want to go sit even on a tier 1 in left, someone's going to have to respond, or you lose the tower. And if you're able to control the pace and control the movement of your enemy, it just makes the game so much easier.
Well, for now, it's back to the farm. Level 19 for Kana, about 4.5 level lead over Zeros, and it just keeps getting worse for the Hades over on this side. In fact, Kana's just going to stick around and keep all the jungle farm away, too. Why stop at just the tier 2 tower? Why stop at just the minion waves? Adapting joins him to make sure that there's nothing for even Johnny on that side of the map to try and farm up.
Man, I am still waiting on that opportunity. Kana refuses to leave that lane. Mans is tanky. This Amaterasu,
He wants that
there's no threat to Kana on the map. There's not a single person Kana could walk up on and say, yeah, I don't want the smoke. Like, keep the fight to yourself. I'll walk elsewhere. Even Ikrom, who is itemized to deal with frontline, executioners, kin size, moving down that bow tree, doesn't really have the DPS to deal with this Amaterasu. So, be able to apply that pressure would be so big for the Highland Ravens. Find a pick as we start to approach the Pyromancer respawn, or as we start to approach that 20-minute mark. A pick could even lead into the Fire Giant, but instead has stagnated on that right-hand side of the map. Fortunately, the Highland Ravens are all aheads. They don't necessarily need Kana to get involved. You still have a level in the jungle. You got a level in mid, level all the way across the map, barring Ikrom, who had gotten that massive bounty from adapting a little bit earlier on in the match. Means that I suppose you're not too pressed for time, but you got to use the lead while you've got it. If you allow Hex Mambo opportunities back into the game, if you extend this match by inaction, Hex Mambo are a team that is very strong and very used to playing, at least individually as players, maybe not in the EU SEC, very used to playing from behind. I think they'll find opportunities back in.
Kana just refuses to leave the lane, man.
My man loves that tower.
He just keeps going back. Now, he's not pushing up the tower. Now he's moving over at least towards the Pyromancer, so working towards something else on the map. Did hit level 20 just around that 18 or so minute mark, but a double blink in by Johnny and Trixtank. The Ravens do get the Pyromancer, but that's both immediate initiations by Hex Mambo used to try and get in to steal that Pyro. Blink down by support and jungle. Means that Johnny's only going to have his ultimate to try and get in and that dart. And Kana's going to go right for the throat. Doesn't end up getting the kill onto Johnny. Good silence by Zeros. May have just been enough, but now we'll finally see Kana rotate out. Fury is respawned on the left side, and it seems that's where Highland Ravens are putting their bets.
Smart target, but Hex Mambo have got vision control around the Fire Giant. Could potentially Hail Mary for that objective. Instead, rotations over towards the Oni Fury. It's going slower than you would have expected, but still very difficult to steal this one.
Ikrom goes up for the snipe steals, and immediately Highland Ravens pull away, then jump right back on as soon as the snipes are gone. So Highland Ravens grab the Oni Fury. It's only Fire Giant now left on the map since Pyromancer was just taken, so not really much of a staggered objective on the map between those teams.
Good news for the Highland Ravens. Fire Giant's on the solo side.
Yeah.
Like, Kana's gonna show up. Like, he's gonna get to it. You couldn't take that fight without him. But due to all this inaction, hold that thought, Ikrom in some trouble here. R.I.P. my friend. Good luck dealing with that global presence. Vaporish Coast with a patented taunt immediately afterward. Head back to base, Ravens. You don't need to push a tier 1 tower. We're 20 minutes in and everybody's got a lead. Maybe go run down the Fire Giant while Ikrom, the primary DPS and the only lead for Hex Mambo, is dead. Instead, tier 1 knocked down, tier 2 should follow suit. No rotation just yet from Hex Mambo. Just Sap 7 and Trixtank turn to the corner.
Wall hits Trix. Pluck in by Silence. Then a dash out by Trixtank. But a tier 1 and a tier 2 of the duo lane now toppled under the might of the Highland Ravens. And the gold lead extended to just over 7,500 gold now that the Ravens have been able to build up. Fire Giant still on the map. Well, Kana's going the opposite way. Okay, no, he's just sending the trebuchet away. I thought, okay, is he really going to go push on the opposite side of the map now? Or right when he finally gets a lead, he's going to finally go to the other side. But no, it seems now that the Ravens will start grouping up towards right. But for the Hex Mambo, I mean, it feels like they've got at least some opportunities to try and get in and grab that Fire Giant. Blinks are back up for Trix and Johnny. But you imagine Hex Mambo step up to this Fire Giant, put a full 5-man commitment to this.
The thought process has got to be for Mambo, lose fire, lose the game. So I'm thinking they step up absolutely here. Fortunately for them, Zeros has closed up a lot of that gap. He should be a factor in this fight.
Pull in on a Trixtank. Wall locks in the Croc for a little bit, but unfortunately for Trixtank, he's just not tanky enough on the Sobek. And Adapting picks up the first kill of the fight. Fire Giant grabbed yet again. Quarter HP on the objective. Snipes in the sky by Ikrom, but they're a little early. Zeros tries to go in for the kill, but now it's Adapting into the sky. Misses the dunk in. Zeros is healing up a little bit, but not quite enough as Vaporish Coast puts him down, and it's only 3 left standing for Hex Mambo as the Ravens go right back onto fire.
Man, Adapting is putting in the work. Essentially just gets Trixtank killed, drop Johnny to half HP, and finishes it off Zeros as Highland Ravens pick up the Fire Giant. Johnny on the wrong side of the map. Vaporish Coast should be able to close that gap. Dart coming up shortly, but where do you go?
Not very often do you get out of a situation like when Coast going with a few more laps there up against the
Classic.
Ratatoskr. So.
7 years of that, by the
Yeah.
way. My man pentaed me like 5 years ago and laugh spammed my entire team's corpses. So no surprise he's doing it here.
And with it, Highland Ravens and that tier 2 tower, now only towers left standing in mid, have pushed that lead up to a 10,000. And that's 10,000 plus a fire giant, so add a little bit of extra kind of metaphorical gold on top. Highland Ravens, game is theirs to lose at this point. Hex Mambo, very difficult for them to step back up. But if their fights in the jungle haven't been so well, does help out for them under these Phoenixes a little bit.
Unofficial six-man's a little bit more DPS. Who's protecting who in a situation like this, though? I think it's really Hex Mambo need to keep that bird alive as opposed to the opposite. The Highland Ravens, I think, can do just about no wrong on the map. Fortunately for Hex Mambo, again, that lead that it established in the solo lane, what was it, 5-6 levels at one point, is starting to slowly close up. Zero's getting a bit more survivability. Had he had Trix Tank live through that initial engagement around the Fire Giant, I believe we probably would have seen Zero's Blink engage. Now with a full stack Thoth, Warlock Staff, Bancroft's Claw upgraded as well, should allow him to start up some of these fights. And triple beads synced up on the Highland Ravens. 60 seconds on Kana, Adapting, and Angry could open up some doors. We've seen the Ravens in positions like this slow play it and try and really just work through the entirety of the map, get those minion waves up before they get involved.
Johnny's getting soloed by... No, don't throw Kana towards Johnny. Throw him the other way.
Well, I don't
Maybe
know.
some backup. Angry doesn't find the dragons, but Adapting finds the dump to the back line. Johnny now gone. Where will Adapting go? Just waiting, at least for his to come back up. Aegis expended. Adapting gets the wall, but Sap7 able to grab a shutdown kill. Trix Tank in the waters. One more shot would have done it. Trix Tank will make it out. Now it's a 4v4 around the left side Phoenix.
Yeah, surprised to see the Ravens not push in with 2 chasing Adapting and 1 dead. It was a 4 versus 2 in the bird itself. Instead, they'd like the 4 versus 4.
Snipes from E-Chrome. Get a little bit of damage through, but not very much. Kind of just poking out the Kepri shield more than anything. Kana has sustained back to full after his fight from earlier on, but not enough damage onto the bird. Without this Fire Giant being an enhanced one, those backdoor protections still up, and Vapor's Coast not able to shred through this bird enough.
Johnny back alive, has global presence, could be an opportunity for Mambo. Zeros goes in with the ultimate, doesn't connect.
Angry gets the flight out, and an immediate disengage by the Highland Ravens. But Johnny's not willing to go for the chase. He's gone to the opposite side of the map instead. So not much more that Hex Mambo can do, but if anything, they've delayed the Highland Ravens. No Phoenix taken just yet. Trix Tank and E-Chrome almost stepping a couple of feet too far. Could have been caught out by the Ravens. So instead, the Ravens will go for the consolation prize. They've taken all the towers off the map. Go ahead and grab the Gold Fury and maybe a Pyromancer to get set up for Fire Giant next time around.
Yeah, good decision from the Highland Ravens to back up there. With Johnny back alive, there's no way the Ravens, even had they stuck around for 5-6 more seconds, would have made it out without casualties. I doubt they even pick up the bird there. So having them disengage, pick up a Fury, maybe a Pyromancer as well as they prepare for the next round of Fire Giant, I suppose a very, very good decision. Keep that gold lead around that 12 to 13,000 mark as we start to look at the Fire Giant once more. It'll be about a minute until it barrels back down towards the battleground. That's the 28-minute mark on respawn. Could see the fight go a little bit long. Hex Mambo in a similar position as they were at the previous Fire Giant, which is, hey, if we lose this fire, it's pretty likely we lose the game. So if the fight elongates, if the dance continues around fire, could see this one be enhanced.
At the moment, we're still about 4 minutes away from that enhanced. Still a little under a minute until Fire Giant respawns to begin with, so we're looking at about a 3-minute dance till that one becomes enhanced by the time it spawns in. Hex Mambo have been able to shore up that lead. It's only 1 down now for Zeros, as he's been able to get most of his itemization up there. Polynomicon and that Bancroft's Claw picked up, so a lot of extra sustain for this Hades to help out, but Zeros really hasn't been able to get too much during these fights. Maybe taking away 1 or 2 sets of beads here and there between Angry or Adapting if he can catch them without their dashes, but outside of that, I haven't really seen the impact from Zeros just yet as the Ravens start to move over towards this right side and set up for fire.
Zeros has one-shot potential now. He could likely just win a 1v1 up against Adapting. Connect the Fear, get the Poly proc, the Leap's doing 500, 600, Devour Souls doing the exact same thing. Zeros is a threat, potentially for the first time this game.
Johnny not there. Zeros. Third HP left on him after one combo from Angry on the
No longer a
Huang.
threat.
But does have a camp, silence, heal. Puts it back up to closer to 50%. But Fire Giant's already been started by the Ravens. Trix Tank goes in. The wall does not catch him out. And the Ravens will pull away from the Fire Giant, but Angry has eliminated Johnny. Trix Tank blown away as well. That's a double for the mid laner. One for the jungler, and making a second one for him. No, Coast will grab that one. Zero's the last man alive in the middle of 3. Does find adapting, but it's a triple kill for Angry. The Highland Ravens with a deicide, and with only one bird needed to be going down, the Highland Ravens with that team fight should take game 1.
Look, I get it's a triple kill for Angry. Awesome. You got the accolade. That entire fight and just about every single one of those kills was set up by adapting. Adapting essentially solos Johnny, goes in the back line, hits a 2-man dunk, finds the wall onto Sap 7 as well. The Thor was just doing too much. If Hex Mambo learned anything from game 1, it's get adapting off that pick. He was the entirety of the early game. He was the entirety of the last team fight. He was the only one to find a pick on the initial Phoenix Siege as well. This Thor is an issue. Get rid of it.
So, I mean, in that case, if the Thor was that big of a problem, what else do you put adapting on? Because he's shown that he can also go towards a pick like this Radskosker and perform almost just as well. So,
anything else?
Think maybe take both of those away?
Sure. Put yourself in a first pick position, get Ratatasker for yourself, ban the Thor. I don't care what it takes. Don't get him that pick again.
Can't be letting adapting get a signature pick and performing that well. Highland Ravens take game number 1, and we'll take a quick little break, and we'll come back for game number 2. Well, in our battle for the #1 seed, so far, the start of that race is going in favor of the Highland Ravens as game #1 went to them in a pretty clean and pretty decisive show match there. A lot of that off the back of adapting on this Thor from about the 5-minute point onward, adapting able to get active into the game and get his team set up for success. And I think something that you were kind of alluding to, Mifflin, moving into game #2, something that while we would love to see adapting back on Thor and see him perform like that, probably not a winning condition for Hex Mambo if they let that one through again.
Yeah, let me be explicitly clear here. I want to see adapting on Thor. Me, Caleb, Mifflin, Sullivan would love to see more adapting Thor. I am a fan of that. But as also simultaneously a fan of highly competitive Smite games, I just don't think that's conducive to that for Hex Mambo. Get him off that pick. Literally anything else.
So take the Thor away from adapting, get him on something maybe a little bit lower through, but all that pressure that adapting was able to get early on, started over in the mid, kind of around that greater Scorpion fight, able to get that first pick onto Johnny, and then really kind of move that lead to the solo lane, allowed Kana to get super far ahead. But outside of that lead in the solo lane, we really didn't see too much come from there. It wasn't until kind of the 15 or so minute mark that we really saw Kana try and use that lead, we saw adapting really make use of that lead as well.
Yeah, by the time Kana had rotated out of solo, he was already level 20, and Zeros were starting to close up the gap because you can't level past 20, right? So if Kana establishes a similar lead, I'd like to see him leverage it a little bit more so. I think it really was that Gold Fury pickup from Hex Mambo that slowed down the pace of the game for the Highland Ravens. If that Gold Fury is still available, it's very likely that Kana rotates out and probably would not have gone back towards his lane. But because Hex Mambo were able to sneak it away from the Highland Ravens, it essentially extended that match by an entire 5-minute period where everybody just kind of stagnates. Kana sits on the tier 2 on right. Everyone else is sitting on their tier 1s all the way across the map, and there really wasn't much to do as far as pushing your lead and finding some sort of pressure. So good play from Mambo in the macro to extend the game. Tough stuff in the team fight, though.
2-0-12 for Kana, 8-3-9 for adapting on the Thor, and a couple more undyings between Angry and Coast. Silence the only other person to die on the side of the Highland Ravens. And it felt like it was a kind of a combination of this Thor and of this Khepri, because by the time Hex Mambo were able to find a kill onto somebody, oh, well, here's a Scarab's Blessing. Now you got to kill him a second time through, and maybe that's why we're seeing so few of the deaths kind of pop themselves out there. But adapting, the one to top the damage charts. Not often we get to see the jungler sitting at the #1 spot there.
No, and I think that is, again, indicative of, I suppose, a win condition for Mambo. Get rid of that pick. Don't want to happen again. Otherwise, I would like to see Johnny, and I feel like I say this a lot about Johnny when we get to watch his games. When Hex Mambo are in losing positions, it makes Johnny look much, much worse because he reminds me of tail end of SPL adapting, in that if the team wasn't doing well, adapting would spend a lot of time farming the jungle, and if you just spend time farming while your team's losing, you're not going to get any opportunities to deal the damage. If you're the only one that's even or ahead out of the jungle on an assassin pick, you really can't initiate, you can't go into the back line because you're still a squishy. So Johnny, sure, may have remained at least close to levels with adapting because the rest of his team was suffering so much, because Johnny was putting so much of his attention on just staying level, staying at least even in the golden experience by clearing out his own jungle. He never really got the opportunity to use the gold that he spent to actually go in and deal that damage. 6K in a roughly 30-minute game from Ratatasker, not exactly impressive.
As the first bans do come through, Khepri and Guan Yu from Hex Mambo. Thor still up, Ratatasker still up. Could be a pick for either of these two junglers there. And then Chernobog and Ymir banned with a Cthulhu. Now this Cthulhu is taken away and the tier. One jungler's going to get Thor, one jungler's probably going to get Ratatasker. It's a matter of which one's going to get it. And Hex Mambo instead will take Kana off the Amaterasu and put it over in towards, at least for Zeros, for the solo lane. So a solo lane pick with how contentious the jungle has been. Maybe a little surprising there, Mifflin.
Maybe they're saying that Thor's not going to be a first 2 selection. With the performance that we had seen in the previous match, I almost would just beg to see it. But with both Ratatasker and Thor available, you're not exactly going to pick up both. could just say adapting is in a position where it's like, I don't really care, man. I'll get my global presence, my knockup, my stun, and no matter what, I'm gonna find the pieces of the kit that I need to find pressure on the map. But it is surprising to see Amaterasu be the priority there, because Amaterasu, of course, did have a phenomenal game, right? A 4-level lead. I'm not gonna leave anything at her feet. The lead was not created by Amaterasu, though. It was a rotation from adapting that put him a level ahead, then a blue buff invade, and then another rotation where he kills Zeros again. All of a sudden, things balloon out of control. Maybe Zero's in a position where he's like, hey, man, I just don't want it to happen to me again. It's not going to be the Amaterasu. I'm not going to be sitting on my tier 2 tower for 10 minutes. Get me that pick, and I'll at least be able to play safely in lane. Even if it is a Thor lock-in, you've at least got the Dazzling Offensive to evade some of that, or the dash and the silence to stop Berserker's Barrage or catch some of these hammers. I like the Amaterasu pick. I am still surprised, though, to see the Thor go unpicked and unbanned.
One more ban. So far, 3 assassins, Hunbats, Set, and Daji. And there's the Thor taken away. But that does leave the Ratatosker up. If the Ravens want to grab that one for adapting, they will do so immediately. To round that out with a Ganesh, Cupid, and a Tiamat. That was picked up in the top 3. Top 3 on the other side for Hex Mambo. Amaterasu was that first pick, and then immediately after Terra and Hachiman. Maybe a little bit of a head scratcher, because we don't see very much Hachiman to begin with. Feels like he's kind of fallen out of favor for a lot of players, Myth.
Hachiman still is, I think, just a standard pick, right? Like, he doesn't really have any bad matchups. He's got a lot of survivability. He was, for a period, one of the most survivable hunters in the game. Jingwei and Heimdall kind of took that title away from him, but still is very, very difficult to actually shut down. Has got decent dive potential as well. So often when Cupids fall behind in a fight, they'll drop Fields of Love to create space for themselves and then dash away. That doesn't stop a Hachiman if he's got the lead. He's just going to ride his horse through it, take the 200-300 damage that Fields of Love does, and continue chasing you down. So I think an all right pick, but one that's going to need some help to establish pressure in lane.
We'll see if Hex Mambo can bring this back, take game number 2, and maybe push us to a third game. Or the Highland Ravens going to 2-0 and be your undefeated and your #1 seed for the EUSCC in phase number 3? We'll have to find out in game number 2 as we jump right in. And it is kind of going on to a Horus this time around. It got picked up right at the very end behind that Ratatosker that adapting has gone over towards multiple times in the past. Johnny going to a hyper carry late game in this Mercury, and Sap7 going with something maybe a little bit more comfortable in that mid lane. The Merlin kind of drafted out there. How do you kind of feel about this early game for Hex Mambo with Johnny and Sap?
It's bad. It's a bad early game, man. Mercury needs items. Until he's got Rage, I don't want to see him in the fight. And Merlin just doesn't get pressure. Fortunately, it's a Tiamat on the other side, so you shouldn't get like completely crushed for the first 5 levels. But as far as fight potential is concerned, I don't think Hex Mambo have got it in the early game. Which one of these lanes are you really leaning on to establish some pressure, create some openings for Johnny in the jungle? I don't think it's the dual lane. You've got a Terra and a Hachiman. Sure, they've got okay sustain, but haven't really got the highest damage output, haven't really got a whole lot of solo potential either until post level 5, and even then, I think I'd still bet on the Cupid and the Ganesh. Amaterasu, I'm not too versed in the Horus versus Ama matchup. I might favor Ama, but if Kana establishes any kind of lead, the damage output very hard to deal with.
Well, we can see some of that immediate damage from Horus right out the gate. With that Fracture Dash right after, puts Zeros a little bit low. Though some decent sustain options do come towards Zeros. I wasn't sure exactly when. So it doesn't seem that he's gone for his dash early on. He has gone for that stance change to try and get some of that sustain. That way he can keep alive in this lane. Silence doesn't have dash available to him just yet. Didn't quite hit level 2. Otherwise, maybe some pressure to throw over towards Trix Tank and E-Chrome. But I'm surprised that Coast and Silence are just able to get as free a pressure as they have. Though Terra, I guess, maybe not the best support to try and match up to Ganesh Cupid.
Yeah, Terra needs a couple of levels and still doesn't have access to that dash, so good luck keeping up in pressure. Once we take over to level 3 and Trixank can actually use some of the damage in his kit, maybe the wave clear starts to look a little bit better. Hachiman versus Cupid, direct matchup. Cupid's going to win out on the pressure there as well, so the pacing in the lane not too surprising as of right now. As we start to see this lane develop, though, imagine we see E-Chrome tick over to level 5 first. Could be an opportunity for Hex Mambo to just go straight in with those ultimates, try and catch Coast off guard. But Coast is a veteran, man. He knows what that experience gap's going to do.
Johnny finds adapting, throws him up against the wall, but not really a whole lot of follow-up quite yet. Zeros does find some decent damage. That's a dash in by Kana. Beads gone for Johnny, and that opens up some blue breath pressure for the Highland Ravens. Buffalo does manage to get stolen away. Kana gets that one. Dash out by Johnny, dash in by adapting stun as well. Finds some good damage. Zeros hitting that level 3 and just enough mana to his name to dash away. No first blood to be happening solo.
Yeah, tough situation. If Kana's able to connect that Fracture onto Johnny, that's first blood every single time. Good target swap from adapting to see how Zeros would respond. It already applied the defense shred to both with that second ability from Ratatasker, so damage was certainly there. But Zero's able to narrowly escape, had just enough mana for that dash, and is able to get back into the tower. Regardless, still a win for the Highland Ravens, stripping away that blue buff. Should be able to fall back to their own jungle, clear that out. That's where you'll start to see the lead actually establish. Again, when you invade these buffs, you strip the farm away from your enemy. That's the most valuable part. But you get mitigated golden experience as opposed to when you clear out your own side of the map. So the lead will establish. Once that speed falls down, then we'll have a better idea of how far ahead adapting is. And it should be a couple hundred gold by now.
Gotta imagine for Johnny, though, it's going to be at least another minute and a half till we start to see him get very active with those beads down. Not too much safety left for this Mercury. Does have Sonic Boom, does have his dash as well, so a couple of tools to get out or maybe get back in. We've seen the all-too classic strat of, well, let's make a rotation over towards this duo lane, see if I can find that big Sonic Boom. As we do see Zeros poked back out. Teleport down for almost 100 seconds. We'll stick around. Not going to go back to base just yet. Does have sustain in that first ability, but gotta imagine for Johnny, once that level 5 hits, maybe try and put some pressure in one of these side lanes.
Yeah, Zeros is just getting experience gapped right now. It just seems like Zeros, and it doesn't just seem that way. He just hasn't got as much experience in the solo lane as Kana on the other side, at least in recent history. So getting abused a little bit over there. Has been caught unaware, has been caught in these poor fights. Even the level order on Amaterasu, getting that heal early on and using so much of your mana for it when you don't have the blue buff puts you in a very tenuous position as well. Get caught off guard, don't go back to base, too weak to contest, means your next rotation of blue buff also belongs to the Highland Ravens. Kana's going to probably establish a pretty similar lead to what we've seen in Game 1 if this pace continues. Someone's got to bail him out. And who is that someone? Is it an early game 1,000-fold Blade Mercury? I don't think so. That's a tier 2 Katana. Is it Sap 7 making an early rotation? Absolutely not. My man's got stacks to concern himself with, and he's playing Merlin. Zeros he's alone. He's fighting for his life over there, and he's got no help.
Does have Death's Toll for a little bit of sustain, but didn't opt to go towards the Golden Blade start himself. Instead, started down towards one of those that round shield very early on. Try and get some early defense, maybe. Kana now finished up with his. Trix Tank going for the invade. Does manage to seal that one away. A little bit of mistiming by Coast and Silence allows for a buff steal for Trix Tank to take that experience away from Coast and Silence.
That's massive for Hex Mambo. Anything you could do on the map from this position is just massive. So having Trix Tank step up and make some solo plays like that could create some space as we get another look at the soul lane. And man, Zeros is just not catching a single break over here. Doesn't have teleport available, was forced to use it to get back to lane so he didn't lose an entire wave to tower. Already back down to half HP, no blue buff available, means every time he tries to sustain with that first ability, he's just losing the war of attrition. Kana's going to keep doing this, man.
And even with that wave still consistently being healed up by Kana as well, it just makes it even harder to clear considering it's only a tier 2 tower shield. For Zero, it's going to be a while until he actually gets that defense and that damage online. And then another Scorpion stolen away from Hex Mambo means the Highland Ravens have built themselves up about a 1,500 gold lead nearly. Johnny's starting up that Sonic Boom, but not many options or many places to go, especially with adapting and Kana walking through the jungle. 3 versus 3 with Silence rotating over alongside Trix Tank. Blue buff secured again by the support. Trix Tank, a master of keeping his buffs for his team and taking them away from the enemy.
Yeah, Zeros needs that buff. Trix Tank is doing a lot on a pick that probably shouldn't be doing a lot right now. So all credit due to the support player of Hex Mambo, keeping the team afloat. The only source of any sort of pressure for his team as of right now. Both defense on the right and offense on the left belong completely to him. Maybe he didn't secure it. Hold on. No, Zero's just concerned about the wave.
Does need that experience. Dunked down by adapting in a dash. And the Heavenly Wings used by Trix. That will get Hex Mambo away from the fight. No first blood to be had, at least around the mid-Harpy camps. E-Chrome rotating over, putting some pressure on the coast. With adapting now on the way, not much more that E-Chrome can do. Able to get at least an early lead established over Vaporish Coast in this duo lane. Something that Hex Mambo desperately needs to lead anywhere on the map.
Yeah, Trixtank vacated the lane a little bit earlier than iSilence, so I believe that lead almost exclusively coming from that singular purple buff invade, as well as having a little bit more solo farm available to E-Chrome. So Hachima, not exactly the best at leveraging it this early, right? It's only about a half level separating these two guys, but certainly has got the ability to fight into this matchup. The only thing that's really helping out Vaporish Coast over E-Chrome is the sustain and kit. They've both got access to the Devourer's Gauntlet, so sustain on wave belongs to both, but any small poke battle that happens over in the duo lane should favor Vaporish Coast just by nature of having those hearts available to him. So if a fight does happen and you're a Hex Mambo fan, you're hoping the first fight decides it. That's the only way I can imagine E-Chrome winning out.
Teleport back by Zeros, gets him his Berserker's shield, but still just constantly being berated by Kana over on this right side. Not really able to get any kind of free pressure or any kind of free wave clear here. Did Angry send the lizards to the right lane? That's just rude.
That's a classic Shinto play, man. All farm belongs to the mid laner. Like, I'm a late game scaler. You want me to get there, don't you? So Angry's going to take every single bit that he can as Sap 7 steps forward. Not a whole lot of threat here between a Tiamat and a Ganesh, so he's allowed to make plays like that. Still needs to be concerned about that global presence from adapting. Ultimate available once more, could get involved, but decides better, or against it rather. Instead, resets himself back to neutral, goes back to farming.
Trixtank dashed in. I'm not sure if that dash got caught there. It sounded like the dash got stopped, at least by Silence with that Ohm. So no further engaged by Trixtank or Hex Mambo. Have been doing a good job of keeping themselves afloat, even kind of fighting back in. It was nearly 1,500 gold earlier on. Now we're looking closer to only about 1,000. So Hex Mambo slowly crawling their way back through this early game, slowly keeping themselves alive. And it just feels like adapting, at least for these first few, have been trying to play catch-up in experience. He has been down about a half level to Johnny for the last couple of minutes.
Yeah, I think a lot of it, again, the experience difference is because of Trixtank. He's the only one doing anything proactive on the map right now. He's the only one who's got the onus for it, too, considering Hex Mambo's jungler needs a little bit more gold until that Rage is finished up. Sap 7 decided to go for a slightly slower build than what we see from Angry on the other side. The Charon's coin as opposed to the Book of Thoth that Sap 7 has already got stacked up. Trixtank's still stacking as well. Hex Mambo have itemized a little bit more so for that late game. The Highland Ravens need to get aggressive.
Whoa, damage onto adapting is good by Sap 7 and Hex Mambo. That's the only one that they're going to get. A quick pick to the jungler, and that's first blood for Hex Mambo.
So fast, I didn't even get the opportunity to break it down. I don't know what happened. He was there and then he wasn't. That's the analysis.
It's a magic trick.
Magic trick, man. Adapting the Houdini for the Highland Ravens. But first blood, nonetheless, to Hex Mambo, who had already closed up a lot of that gold gap, had established an experienced lead, should now firmly have the experienced lead and close up the gold entirely. A stagnated game is one that Hex Mambo is very capable of playing. Slow it down. Don't leverage any of your leads. Don't play around Kana in the solo. So Zero's being behind doesn't exactly matter. He spent the entire, 12, 11 minutes we've been in this match in the Tier 1 tower. Hasn't really net them anything, has it? Highland Ravens haven't gone towards a Pyromancer to play around Kana's advantage in the soul lane. They really haven't gone back towards that blue buff since the defense from Trixtank a little bit earlier on. Every bit of aggression crushed by Hex Mambo's support, and now starts to belong to them. Imagine we start to see some objective play from Hex Mambo. Now that Rage is finished for Johnny, Merlin's got a little bit of damage as well with that Mirrodin in the second slot. Both these gods very, very strong and objective burn. Group up on a gold free, play around that Pyro. I think Hex Mambo have now waited long enough, 12 minutes in, where they can be the progenitors of aggression.
Pretty sure 11,000 of that player damage that Kana has done has just strictly been towards zeros. We haven't seen really anybody on this right side of the map aside from Johnny at one point to try and help out the blue buff and have a little skirmish there, but Kana just keeping up the bully game. Stat pad more than anything for his damage. Looks nice for him, but I mean, game number 1, we saw the massive experience gap kind of pop its way through. Never really left the right side of the map until he was already level 20. It seems like we might be getting a repeat out of this horse here in game number 2, just because Highland Raven Soul Laner doesn't seem like he's concerned with anything except the wave right now.
My man said, I'm winning the 1v1, right? It's like in your ranked match where your Soul Laner is like Team Chasm, right? Like, I was dominating. I got their tower. I don't know. I would like to see Kana make a rotation. You've got global presence, right? That's what the Horus is good for. Just jump into one of these fights. Imagine he's there to help out adapting on a fight on his side of the map. No way Zeros can match rotation because Zeros is perma half HP. If he walks into the jungle, he has to be concerned for his own life. But because Kana has not even threatened rotating out of the lane, he has not threatened anything besides sitting on that tier 1 tower line. The lead established, the damage output, the half level now that Kana's got over Zeros simply doesn't matter. It is simply not a factor. They haven't gone for any blue buff invades recently. Nothing's coming of it. And eventually Zeros is going to have enough defense where Horus, who is not exactly the most damage heavy pick, just won't be able to compete anymore. Zeros is getting rapidly to a position where this bully lane's going to turn around.
Wish we could see a heat map for Kana in these last couple of games just to see where he's been stepping. Because I guarantee, at least in this game, there's just a giant dot sitting at the tier 1 tower, a giant dot sitting in the middle of that lane. If we go back to game number 1, probably at the enemy tier 2 tower, there's probably a big red dot and a couple little trails that go there. Ultimate onto E-Chrome by Coast. We'll trade out an ultimate, so Cavalry expended for E-Chrome, but that's just the nature of going up and having a CC ult against these Cupids. Cold Fury started by the Highland Ravens, and with no ultimate for Coast, this one will go cleanly to Hex Mambo. What was 1,500 gold down for Hex Mambo earlier on, it's now at least a 700-800 gold lead they've established themselves.
More important, that 2,000 experience, I think, at this portion of the game when the gold lead is so minuscule, it's more so about the actual levels you've got and having one across the board just about. For Hex Mambo, very, very significant. I'm keeping my eyes on this next neutral objective. With Gold Fury off the map, there's no longer an opportunity to trade out. I think Hex Mambo could still play around the Pyro regardless of Kana's aggressive positioning, or maybe to spite it, Kana, no dash.
Kana does use the beads early, but rooted in place, finds the dash to the minions. Dazzling Offensive doesn't find the distance, and now up off the tree, adapting Milan on towards Zeros, finds the damage, but needs a little bit more. With Angry and Silence here, there's still not quite enough. Trix Tank in the middle of 4, no fear, will dash right back in. But that's a low mana on the Terra, no ultimate available to him as well. And after all the fighting and after the dust has settled, not a single person goes down on either side.
Yeah, that is a massive drop from Hex Mambo. Pick on Akana is a free Pyromancer immediately, but instead takes a little bit too long. Johnny a bit indecisive on that Sonic Boom, decides against it, and lets that kill fizzle out. Kana able to immediately resustain thanks to that Caduceus shield as well. So, should spell the end of the engagement unless just a straight up pull on the Pyromancer. A lot of Highland Ravens nearby.
Silence can't get in. Hex Mambo take the Pyromancer. More gold in their pockets, but a lot of that mitigated out by the Ravens. Only 1,200 gold up now, still sitting around that same experience mark, if not at least just dead even in that regard. So Hex Mambo have been keeping themselves afloat, but keeping yourself afloat in the early game is what they more so needed to do. How does the late game look for Hex Mambo kind of squaring off against the Highland Ravens?
Late game's good. Merlin in the late game's got massive damage and space control in jungle team fights. Mercury doesn't exactly lose any 1v1s up against the Highland Ravens, especially if he keeps itemizing towards crit. We haven't seen too much anti-crit just yet on the side of the Ravens. Keeping my eyes out for some Spectral Shields as the game starts to develop there. Initiation for Hex Mambo, very, very good. Trix Tank with the Earthen Fury can just get into that back line, apply that, or even run them down with those roots, those long-range stuns. Zeros, the Dazzling Offensive, and enhanced movement speed, thanks to his first ability, means that he will likely be connecting his stuns pretty consistently as well. Whereas on the other side, the Highland Ravens, They've also got great team fight. Their space control is superior across the board to Hex Mambo just thanks to the dual lane ultimates. Fields of Love plus Dharmic Pillar is just so hard to position around, especially in jungle fights. Global Presence from Adapting, a little bit more powerful than the Global Presence from Mercury. Being able to essentially fly the way of the bird as opposed to just having to run down a lane means that you're a bit more adaptable in these jungle narrow corridors. But if the lead keeps developing for Hex Mambo, I'd argue the team fight, or gods rather, won't really matter nearly as much. I think this next rotation of POIs, Oni Fury on respawn, going to be very telling for the rest of this game. I'm keeping my eyes on the Ravens. I'm keeping my eyes on Adapting, man, because this is a complete switch up from what we saw in Game 1. I know I said get him off the Thor, it's going to be a lot better for you. I wasn't expecting him to put up 1,800 damage in 18 minutes.
Yeah, haven't really seen much out of the Ratatoskr just yet. Though to be fair, only barely 700 damage above him is Johnny on the Mercury, so haven't seen much out of him this early on either. Only kill so far was the first blood that happened in that mid-right side jungle skirmish. That was over for Hex Mambo, able to get a pick for Sap 7 early on to kind of help him out in that lane. But outside of that, haven't seen really too much fighting at all. I mean, we saw the fight in the right side of 4v4 at the end of it all, and nobody ended up going down there. Didn't see really any fight over that last Gold Fury, and with only about 45 seconds till the next one is up, gotta imagine that's where we'll see the next big team fight break out.
It has got to be, but the lead, again, not so massive for Hex Mambo. I know everything has gone their way, but when everything in a match is like a fight, like a Greater Scorpion, like an objective, like, sure, everything has gone your way, but a lot of nothing is still nothing, or all of nothing is still nothing. So with the lead only being at around that nearly 2,000 mark, I don't think Hex Mambo should be so confident in their ability to just pull an Oni Fury in the face of the Highland Ravens. We haven't seen it just yet. Kana has made no attempt to do it so far, but double global presence from the Highland Ravens means Hex Mambo need to be real sure when they pull these objectives. Already Adapting, starting to show some presence on the left side of the map. Should keep Mambo guessing. I'm keeping my eyes on Kana. Where's he going to start to show up? Where's he headed on the map? I'd like to see him towards that Oni. I really would.
Nope. It's right lane. He's not level 20 yet, Biff. He can't leave that lane.
My man was an ADC, or wanted to be.
Instead, he got stuck over in solo lane, so he had to be the beefier ADC in this regard. Highland Ravens still keeping at bay, at least with Hex Mambo, but as mentioned, lead has not really gone too significantly one way or the other. 1,500 one side, 1,500 the other, maybe. Something more to break out.
Whew.
Root does find some good damage with the follow-up from E-Chrome. Puts Silence to about half HP, and with Oni Fury on the horizon, don't want your support to already be handicapped moving into this objective.
No, not at all. Slight difference on the map, though, or at least relic presence. Zeros has access to teleport right now, so could get over to this Gold Fury fight if Hex Mambo decide to take it. Difficult to take now with Highland Ravens controlling vision of the pit. So, Kana, even with global presence, won't be able to match the rotation of Zeros. Kana also doesn't have a lead anymore.
What? Adapting tries to take a 1v1 against Sap and just outright loses the trade. Sap 7 with the second kill of the game, a pick on the jungler. Starts up some pressure on towards the Oni Fury. Angry, Coast and Silence are here to maybe try and at least slow this one down. Fury gets pulled, Fury gets leashed. With the Typhoon out, that'll push Hex Mambo away.
Hex Mambo slow playing it, using the sustain from this Terra, and allowing Johnny to line up the ultimate.
Sonic Boom finds Silence, Fields of Love, gets some good value to bail Silenced out. But they're still 4 strong on Hex Mambo. They go right back to the Oni Fury. Angry and Coast, full HP though, are just enough threat that the Highland Ravens do not want to pull the objective. And in a fun twist of events, Kana has left the solo lane only to be forced to use his first ultimate defensively into the tier 1 tower.
Fortunately, in just rotating, the pings from Zeros generates enough threat on map. Kana just showing up in the middle of the map stops the Oni Fury in its tracks and forces the entirety of Hex Mambo to rotate towards him. A small rotation that really is just him ulting defensively, I think finds value for the Highland Ravens. An Oni Fury would have been much more threatening than a Pyromancer right there. I mean, pick up the Oni, you can start putting all your attention on the right-hand side of the map. If you're threatening Pyromancer, you're simultaneously threatening the Fire Giant, enhanced minion waves, threatening your towers as well. If Hex Mambo picks that one up, things look very, very different as of right now. But to break down how the fight starts, adapting, tries to step up to SAP 7. And I've been in a position like this before in the jungle where you're thinking to yourself, we need something. The team's behind. You got to make something happen. If we want to get this Fury for ourselves, it's got to be an individual play. So adapting maybe in a moment of frustration tries to take out this Merlin. Overcommits slightly. Doesn't even use the beads there. I suppose doesn't really find the opportunity. And loses out in that 1v1. At the end of the day, though, still is a reset back to neutral.
Fury drug out. Highland Ravens get it. But one more can be had. Seems the team fight will fizzle away. Highland Ravens will just grab their one objective and move themselves immediately out of the fight. So quick retreat from them. It was a 2,000 gold lead. Still sitting up about 1,500 for Hex Mambo even after that objective. With Pyromancer down, not much more to be had as far as neutral farm is concerned. Greater Scorpion is active and a couple of buffs for Johnny to start hitting, but both solo laners hitting level 20, both of them have access to the fully upgraded starter item. A pick onto Silence could be a good start for Hex Mambo, but a quick dash out will make sure to get the support away.
And the experience gap may be massive for Hex Mambo, but you gotta wonder how much of the experience gap is held by targets that are already level 20. Hex Mambo are not so far ahead as it might appear.
Fire started. Kana goes in the middle of 3 and finds some good damage. Will dash back out, stun onto Angry. Into the back line, Sonic Boom gets 2. Fields of Love, though, will catch out Trickshank nearly. Kills the support, but it's the Soul Laner who goes down first. Porsche Coast finds 1. Johnny gets adapting in the back line, a 1-for-1, but it's now 2 as Coast picks up a double kill.
Yeah, Zeros just steps a little too far forward, doesn't realize that the damage is not behind him. SAP 7 was forced to back up. Trickshank on the retreat as well. So all Zeros does is trade his life for Trix's, and I'd argue the level 20 Amaterasu might just be a bit more valuable than the level 15 Terra. So Highland Ravens, in a 2-for-1, just lose Adapting, who is the only death on the side of the Ravens, so the lowest bounty possible for Hex Mambo. Win out on the team fight, take out a tier 1 on right, and with the back of Johnny, revealed itself on the map, by the way. Highland Ravens know Johnny's head back to base. Yeah, I agree. Pull the Fire Giant.
Grab that. 3 on it, but Sap and Trickstank are on the way. Both of them full HP. Should force the Ravens away from the pit, and it does do so. Player damage. Just to take a look at it. Again, I'm pretty sure like 95% of that damage that Kana did is just against Zeros. That's like the first team fight that we've seen Kana actually take part in there, but crazy to see that he's 32,000 up to next one being like 11K.
Yet 50,000 mitigated by our boy Zeros, who has just been a sandbag, a punching bag. He's taken a lot of punishment from Kana, but Zeros is a veteran, and I don't think Zeros cares, right? Like a lot of soul laners, were like, career soul laners would be like, oh man, I'm losing the lane, I'm stuck in my tower, this sucks. Zeros is sitting there like, I don't play this role, and you haven't done anything, right? You've sat here and you've hit me, and it's accomplished literally 0 this game. Fine, keep doing it. Pad your stats. I don't care. I'm keeping my eyes on the team fight.
Do you see the group up by Hex Mambo? Teleport in for Kana, and Fire Giant started. Hex Mambo grab it, immediately leash away. Kana is up in the ultimate, does dunk down, finds Trickstank stun, is good, and Fields of Love will lock down the support. Coast gets the first kill of the fight. Where will Adapting land? Seems it's back to the safety of his team as the Highland Ravens grab their 1 pick of the team fight and move back towards Fire.
Fire Giant pulled out, but burning very, very slow. Good poke onto E-Chrome. Takes away that escape. Kana putting some pressure into that back line, but the Highland Ravens have reset the objective. A lot of space created, but for what? Fire Giant's HP bar has not moved in the slightest. Eye silenced, pulls it again. Zero's forced to step up, face check to check the HP of the Fire, loses his beads in exchange.
The ring is out. The Fire Giant still slowly going down. Barely is at the halfway point. Has 0 step too far forward. Kana has forced 1 ultimate away, and Johnny is combat adapting, misses the dash, gets a heal from his solo laner, and that's enough to keep him alive. Meanwhile, Kana will go right back to fighting against the carry. Ikrom forced out of the beats and the Aegis, and one more dash and heal by Kana to top the team off. Ikrom maybe stepping a little too far forward. Angry shows him what damage this mid lane mage has. Forces the Hunter back to resustain.
No beads for Sap, no relics at all for Ikrom, and Johnny on respawn won't have access to his beads either. The Highland Ravens have stripped away a whole lot of resources and put some of these lives on a timer. 20 seconds until Johnny can try and step back up onto the map. So the Ravens, in resetting and healing, put themselves in a position once more to pull the Fire Giant. HP moving real slow, but just by generating that threat, Hex Mambo have got to continually step forward and try and check on the Fire Giant pit.
Search Zeros. Dazzling offensive finds only one with the stun. Zeros dashed out just in time to get away from the Dharmic Pillars. Trix Tank will drag the Heart Bomb out. But if it's a battle sustain, there is a Horus on the side of the Ravens. Could use that to keep the carries a little bit alive.
Cupid heals.
But Johnny wasn't even really a part of that team fight. Instead, grabs the speed buff, heads his way back to base, and Fire Giant once again leashed by the Ravens. No objective to be had.
Massive power spike for Johnny, though. Serrated Edge now finished up. Deathbringer, Rage, a little bit of penetration, and Lifesteal now as well. Johnny, very, very dangerous to the Highland Ravens. But we talked about it a little bit earlier. The Highland Ravens space control is very good into picks like Mercury. Does Mercury want to have to walk through a Fields of Love? Does he want to have to walk through a Dharmic Pillars? He needs to concern himself with the dunk from adapting. There's a whole lot that Johnny's going to have to work through or wait for until he can feel safe into jumping into that back line. So, major win condition for Hex Mambo is burning through those resources, and it's got to be either Zeros or Trix Tank forcing them out. Trix not exactly tanky as of right now. We've seen it twice where he just steps up and loses too much of his HP to the Tank Shred build that Vaporage Coast has gone for. I'm keeping my eyes on positioning in these engagements. I'm very interested in how Hex Mambo decide to address this one. We saw it twice in a row where Zeros goes in with the ultimate, the Dazzling Offensive. There just was not quite enough damage behind him to make it valuable.
Trix Tank CC'd. To the back line goes Zeros. Who's about a third of his HP trying to get there, though. Dharmic Pillars used. Sap and Zeros are out. Adapting on the tree, dunks in the middle of two. Sonic Boom doesn't find anybody, and it's Adapting who gets the first kill, but he trades out as a 1-for-2 now, with Vaporage Coast getting one. Ikrom up on the horse, does get out, and so does Zeros. And Johnny's still full HP on the Mercury. Not finding the big value with that ult. Now the Ravens have turned towards Fire Giant.
Ikrom, you sure about this one? These are narrow margins you're playing with. One connected CC should cost him his life as Angry steps forward as well. Fire Giant down to 50%. Ikrom and Johnny still nearby.
Kana goes to the dash, misses. Johnny to the back line to try and get in, but the Fire Giant got leashed. Johnny dashes out.
Y'all gonna reset that, really?
And the Fire Giant, now enhanced, has been reset. Zero steps up. Zeros gets hit by a little bit of CC of his own and will now be forced back as well.
Fire Giant's gotta go down now. Highland Ravens are in such a good position. Johnny can't step up, Ikrom can't step up, and Zeros is not a threat of steal. You are not losing it to Amaterasu. Fire Giant finally does fall down. At this point, you might as well have just waited for adapting. He's like 1 second off respawn. You had already face-checked literally every threat and dropped them all down to 20% before the objective had fallen. Feels like maybe you could have just given it 1 more second for your boy, but the Highland Ravens in a long battle finally take the biggest neutral objective on the map and can start working their way through still 3 towers standing for Hex Mambo 30 minutes in.
Feels like that war of attrition style that the Kings like to play around those Fire Giants of, okay, well, we might not be getting a whole lot done, but because we're not doing anything but we're standing around fire, we're kind of forcing the enemy to also not get a whole lot done. But that's allowed for some map pressure to go the way of the Ravens. Tier 1 tower and left is gone. Step up by the Hex Mambo gets stopped immediately. 5-man death ball to the left side of the map for the Highland Ravens. Ikrom the only one in the tower line. And with it being an enhanced Fire Giant, these towers don't stand much of a chance. No minions are needed to really take these ones down. So Tier 2 and left gone away immediately.
Phoenix will go down in a similar speed given the opportunity, but Hex Mambo has got a phenomenal base defense composition. Trix Tank space control and Merlin being one of the, if not the best mage on defense, could make this difficult.
Fields of Love Only catches Trix Tank. But the ult's down from E-Chrome. Angry.
Zeros, you sure?
Has picked off one. Zeros does find the stun up against Silence, but now the Trebuchet will at least put a little bit of pressure towards the Phoenix. Highland Ravens can keep around for a little while longer, but Trebuchet goes down swiftly to damage through. Dark Pillars does find two. My Silence goes in, adapting off the tree. Will get the beads and the Aegis away from E-Chrome. Silence in from Zero. Sonic Boom doesn't find anybody, but adapting does get the kill on towards E-Chrome. Sap 7 has the Aegis and beads just to get back to the fountain. And the Highland Ravens in one fell swoop have taken the Fire Giant, taken both towers on the left side of the map, and will now move their way into the jungle.
Kana still has ultimate, but with so many towers still standing, seems like the Ravens not exactly willing to walk into the Titan room, and I can't argue against it. Trix Tank on respawn, just 5 seconds now, likely would have got involved in that fight. So instead, take as much as you can on the map. Tier 2 in mid, and the Phoenix immediately afterward. Tier 2 on right could be an opportunity, but instead, the Highland Ravens, they've decided they've removed enough of the protections from the Titan. They're walking in.
They are, but Johnny's nearby. No
And they are
Sonic
walking
Boom
out
for the Mercury, and not much fight for the Highland Ravens. They will back away from the Titan at least, and maybe instead put their eyes towards this Tier 2 in right. They do have minions there, so they can take this one pretty easily for themselves, but Phoenix may be in the eye of interest for the Ravens. They will stick around.
Entire minute.
Hex Mambo still sticking by. Sonic Boom down for Johnny for at least another 30 seconds. We'll see if Highland Ravens can get it done. Dash in by Zeros. Pillars by the support. Zeros will let you use ultimate to get away from the Fields of Love. Johnny trying to get into the backline as he can and does find a kill up against Fake Porsche Coast. And adapting uses his ultimate defensively to get out of the T5, but Johnny has stepped too far forward, and Angry will punish him. Trix Tank able to find a stun on towards
Adapting.
2. And adapting, looping back in. Gets the blink, but a dash out by Sap. Not quite enough damage. The Acorn from max range will grab that kill. Zeros thrown up in the sky, but not enough follow-up damage immediately after. Highland Ravens get 2 picked, and maybe even this right side bird, as there are still a few players to that Fire Giant for another few seconds. Highland Ravens go in. Right side Phoenix, the last one standing, should go down swiftly to the Ravens.
Yeah, they kind of need Angry autoing that Phoenix. Hasn't done it just yet, so the Phoenix doesn't go down. Angry.
What?
Your boy Adapting didn't have EFG. He can't really do it. You did. Maybe instead of chasing out with Primordial Onslaught, you could have taken out that last structure instead. Able to push in slightly. Maybe they could have even just walked past Hex Mambo and actually just killed the Titan there. E-Chrome chasing out. No ultimate available means Eye Silence not really under threat. So right side bird maintained for Hex Mambo. Silver lining for him. It's the only bird still standing, but Fire Giant's going to be spawning in about 50 seconds, and it is just as enhanced as it was previously. So Highland Ravens have got significant map advantage. They've got gold advantage. They've got XP advantage. Not that it really matters with everybody sitting at level 20 as of now. Gotta think Hex Mambo find themselves in a position where they have to defend fire, but can they? Double ultimate presence, or global ultimate presence from Kana and Adapting means that you got to be real worried about backdoor. What's the Titans HP, like 3,000 right now?
Not great.
Yeah, not exactly great odds. Maybe it's just a drop ship play. Have your horse get you in there.
Kana rotating over to that direction, adapting on the tree. But where will he go? Towards Trix Tank. Finds the stun after. Good damage from Sap.
What happened to Angry?
To zone this team fight, but Angry's health bar is low. Johnny able to grab the pick there, but stunned out immediately by the horse, and no further follow-up from there. Highland Ravens lose their mid laner, adapting. Critical HP himself cannot stick around for this team fight. And the left side minions will start to pour through. Hex Mambo at least answering by pushing up mid lane for themselves.
Yeah, they've done a good job, Hex Mambo, of keeping these minion waves out of base. Even a second of these enhanced minion waves touching your Titan, and you're really finding yourself in a very poor position. Left side Phoenix on the mend, has already respawned, will heal up slowly over time as Johnny deals with the last enhanced minion wave of the Highland Ravens there. That's just a play where the Ravens think they've got an opportunity to catch out Trix Tank, but Trix Tank is Terra. Good luck. That is a difficult god to actually pick, especially when she's knock-up immune against a Ratatasker. Dunk all you want, it will do only damage, and not exactly a whole lot of it at that. So Hex Mambo, from the brink, find an amazing pick onto Angry, thanks to Johnny's great positioning and good usage of that Sonic Boom. But the Highland Ravens are still in a pretty decent position. That mid Phoenix on the men now has respawned, but there's still another enhanced minion wave, unless Johnny's got something to say about it, and he does. Map state back to neutral. Hex Mambo. It's just like the first Fire Giant dance. This is going to be probably a pretty long one. If it's a war of attrition, we've seen it go the way of Highland Ravens just about every single time. They've got the sustain advantage, as opposed to just the healing of Terra on the other side. But DPS is different this time around. Itemization, very, very different. Everybody on Highland Ravens 6-slotted. A couple of members of Hex Mambo just lagging a bit behind in the build.
Well, Sap will shore that up a little bit. Pendulum of Ages now up. Only person who hasn't been able to pick up that 6th item is Trix Tank, but when we look at the top of the scoreboard there, 3,000 gold, that's nothing at 38 minutes. Fields of Love will catch out Trix Tank yet again. Zeros goes in with the ult. Only gets Kana with it. Trix Tank caught out by Adapting Spin. Not enough damage. Sonic Boom to the backline. Finds some good value, but Johnny doesn't end up getting a kill from any of those. Adapting dunks in. Wants this kill on Trix. Will get it, but it's going to cost him his life. A 1-for-1. Jungle for support at this? Not sure if that's worth the trade out.
Coast dropped low as well. Sap Saven takes a lot of damage. Angry can't quite finish it off, but Johnny can. So long as he can get that Meiji look over the wall. Angry not hugging the wall. So Johnny doesn't get to finish off that kill either. One more punch, different team fight. But at the end of the day, Hex Mambo win out cleanly, and Fire Giant's going quick.
Fire Giant melted. Hex Mambo get it. Kana goes down. Johnny gets the credit for the kill there. Now, a 2-for-1 trade. Losing your support for enhanced Fire Giant and 2 kills, 1 onto Adapting and Kana. That's worth every day of the week for Hex Mambo.
Hex Mambo are ostensibly winning. They are just winning right now. They've got Fire Giant on 4. It's the exact same position the Ravens were in with their enhanced Fire Giant, except Johnny's got it when Adapting did not. Hex Mambo, with 2 dead still, could continue to put on pressure, but do not. Without their tank, without Trix Tank, I suppose not confident, and just walking into that Phoenix, and Sap 7 had returned to base as well, so instead, get rid of all the towers first, and that's exactly what they do. Back up, pick up the Primal Fury, spend up that gold, upgrade your relics, maybe a couple power potions as well. Hex Mambo have completely turned this game on its head, man, and it's all off the back of one poor play from Adapting and a couple of phenomenal plays from Johnny. Johnny getting involved with those Sonic Booms, the difference maker, but the decision-making of Adapting to trade his life for Trix Tanks, that is a clear decision, by the way. Once you dunk on a Trix Tank, there's no way Adapting's thinking to himself, and then I escape. No, he knows he's done there. Strange stuff, and now Hex Mambo in the driver's seat.
Hex Mambo able to take away all 3 of the Tier 2 towers that were standing in one fell swoop. And now we have the base defense for the Highland Ravens to come up this time around. We saw how powerful the defense was for Hex Mambo, how good Sap was at being able to keep the minions out, the poke that Echrome was able to put out with that banner and with that Odysseus bow. Do the Highland Ravens have a similar base defense to try and keep Hex Mambo out?
It's not as good as the defense of Hex Mambo, but it is different in execution at least. Mambo was allowed to sit in their bird for as long as they wanted and just have Sap 7 throw out damage. Highland Ravens, once Ice Silence throws out that ultimate, expect an all-in engagement.
Sap, transform to Ice Stance. Doesn't really find a whole lot of damage up against the enemy team. Gets some good poke on the Phoenix to start out. But Adapting and Johnny, hovering towards the mid lane, have not made themselves very well known. Jarmic Pillars finds Trix Tank. Fields of Love again expended. And the Terra goes down. Johnny rotates over, but Echrome gets a pick against Kana. Now Silence low. Silence almost down. To Odysseus bow. Proc Zeros really wants this
Good
one.
Aegis!
And it'd be at least a delay before Johnny takes 1 kill. But Johnny will take 2 of his own. It's a double kill for the jungler. Zeros grabs another one for himself. 4 down on Highland Ravens. Only Silence left alive, and it might not be for much longer as he's being batted away by the fists of Johnny. Hex Mambo in one team fight have turned this game back around. A deicide for Mambo and a game 3 on the horizon.
In the battle of the top of the European SCC, could it have gone any other way besides going the distance? Hex Mambo and the Ravens taking us to a phenomenal game 3 and a back and forth game 2. This is a wild set. As of now, if context is needed for the fans at home, Both of these teams are sitting at undefeated in the European SEC. One of them has got to take an L, and it'll all be deserved and figured out in this next match.
Game 3 is going to be a very important one for both these teams. Who is going to take that first seed slot for themselves? Who is going to remain undefeated? Will it be the Highland Ravens? Will it be the Hex Mambo? We'll find out after this break. Over 40 minutes of gameplay for game number 2, and it's Hex Mambo who bring it around at the end of it and are able to tie up the set and bring us to game number 3 between the battle of the number 1 seeds. Couldn't go any other way but making it to the full distance out there. Hex Mambo, though, started off fairly strong for themselves, able to keep themselves at least a nice early lead. And then we did see Highland Ravens kind of fight back, push the lead towards themselves. They get an enhanced Fire Giant, take a couple of Phoenixes, almost fully wipe the map, and win the game. But then Johnny steps up big right at the end whenever his team needed him most, able to bring this one back and at least lead his team to a Game 2 win.
Johnny spent 30 minutes doing nothing. My man cleared buffs, went back to base, eat hot chip, and lied his entire way through the first half hour of that game. But in the last 10 minutes, decided to step up and single-handedly win his team the game with the assistance of a couple of misplays from adapting. But regardless, got to give credit to that Mercury because we had talked about it plenty of times throughout the duration of that match. This is not a composition on the side of the Ravens that is easy to execute Mercury gameplay on. The space control of Dharmic Pillars and Fields of Love, it is so difficult for a Mercury to find his opportunities and actually all-in engage like we saw in the last 2 team fights. So props to Johnny, phenomenal play from him. But I just gotta imagine how different this game looks if Kana doesn't farm 40,000 damage against Zeros. What if Kana farmed 10,000 damage with his 2-3 level lead anywhere else on the map? It could have been so different. As well as just the decision-making process of the Highland Ravens in 4 or 5 back-to-back team fights to drop every single one of their ultimate cooldowns onto Trixtank. Every single time. Trixtank survived like the majority of the Fire Giant fight. Sure, you got him on Phoenix defense, but we saw what that cost you, and it was the game. I'm excited to see what the adaptations look like in this next match. Both Johnny and Adapting have quiet early games, with Adapting having the data now of, hey, game 1, if I dominate the map, we're probably just going to win all the way across the board. Maybe we see him try and lock in something a little bit more aggressive. Johnny now with the data of game 2, hey, if we make it to 40 minutes and I'm a full stacked Mercury, I'll dominate. Maybe he decides to keep it slow there. Either way, adaptations certainly got to be on the minds of both of these teams as we start to move our way into Peace and Bees.
Got to point out that 32,000 was the player damage that Kana had as we started before we got to the actual team fight stage. Only got another 8,000 there. Closest to him was like 14K, I believe, kind of next on the charts. Angry put up 54,000 damage. So Kana spent all that time, you said, only fighting against his opposition, only fighting Zeros. We'll see maybe if things do change up. Game number 3, picks and bans for the Highland Ravens and Hex Mambo. We'll see what change-ups do get made between these teams. Hex Mambo now in the second pick slot. Highland Ravens, the option for first pick for themselves. Last time around, it was picking up the Amaterasu for Hex Mambo in that first pick slot. And we kind of questioned the decision-making there, but seemed to have worked out for Zeros. He held on for 30 minutes of onslaught, 30 minutes of being a punching bag for Kana to turn up and be the assist in being a winning factor for his team.
I wonder if the strategy is just leave Zeros on an island and pray that he can keep his head above water. There are better picks for that. We see it very often exemplified in the SPL when coaches have to sub in for their Solniers. There are 3 picks that jump to my mind. Jormungandr, he's going to hold on. Good luck killing him. I don't even care if you send like 5 people to his lane. He's just going to World Serpent his way all the way across the map. Sun Wukong with the Somersault Cloud is nearly unkillable, as well as the transformation into a bird. But if the idea is to have Zeros just hang on in lane and then be a dominant factor or beads burner in the team fight, Jing Shen comes to mind as well. That's one that has had a lot of success over in that soul lane. So I wouldn't be surprised to see them move towards picks like that, or considering last game was a success. Ama again.
Well, Ama not for Zeros, Ama for Kana. Back to the same as the game number 1 was. As the bans rolled through, it was Ymir, Tyr, and Merlin. Banned away by the Ravens. Opposite side, Khepri, Guan Yu, and Cthulhu. For Hex Mambo, that allows for the Ama first pick for the Ravens, and now a Cupid immediately responded to for the Hex Mambo at the very least. So getting into that dual lane, getting something for the carry and comfortable, and even with that dual lane, no. Will be Tiamat, a 3rd game in this set and a 3rd game for Tiamat locked.
Tiamat has not done a whole lot in the early game, but neither of these teams have done a whole lot in the early game. You know, it actually reminds me of the conversation we had with the Leviathans yesterday during their team check-ins. That man had essentially said, when junglers aren't playing for pressure it allows every other lane to play incredibly slow. I believe it was actually Haddix that had said this, and I think this is a great example of what he meant by it. Because neither one of these junglers is exactly playing for pressure, except for game 1, adapting absolutely dominated the map on the Thor. But in game 2, it allowed Tiamat to make her way all the way to the late game. It allows this Yu Huang to get away with a whole lot of just farming in lane. Unless you have someone that can threaten them, there's no reason for mid laners to look at picks like the Amuzin Cobb that has completely dominated the P's and B's in the SPL. There's no reason to look at the Mercury or the who's the one that transforms? The Morrigans or the Sets or the high pressure mid laners that can dictate the pace of the game, because you're allowed to get to that 6th slot. You're allowed to get to that 30-minute mark. And considering how the picks haven't really shifted up too much here in game 3, and considering how historically match point in high stakes match like this, where you're fighting over first seed, generally will start to slow down the pace of game as well, considering a lot of these teams are very hesitant to go for risky plays in situations like this. I think both Mambo and Ravens are correct to play slightly slower picks towards the center of the map.
Ama, Yu Huang, and Athena for the Highland Ravens. Hex, Mambo, Cupid, Tiamat, and a Hunbat. So this might be one of the first times we've seen the jungler picked up in the top 3 for these two teams. That jumps into the bans, allows for some immediate jungle bans by Hex, Mambo. Thor and Daji taken away. Highland Ravens focus on the support with that Athena already locked in, grabbing the Ganesh. And I was wondering what that last one's going to be. It will be a Terra taken away. Strong performance out of the support for Hex, Mambo. Last time around, the Terra does warrant the ban from the Highland Ravens this time around.
So Bacchus locked in. We've got Trix back on one of his holy trifecta, right? It's
right.
Terra, Sobek, Bacchus. He loves those 3, and he's got at least one of them. Should be able to be at least a little bit aggressive on the map, and I would argue Trix was the only one doing aggressive plays throughout the first 15 or so minutes. Walks into a purple buff on his own at the 10-minute mark, steals that away as Terra. Walks into his own team's blue buff to bail out Zeros at around that 17-minute mark. So getting him on something that is capable of playing that pace of game and one that can really punish you on his own. Bacchus has deceptive damage output. I think bodes well for Hex Mambo.
Mercury and Heimdall, so adapting, going to the late game hyper carry this time around. Heimdall, which normally is one of the hunters that kind of gets contested for that first pick between the EU region. Haven't really seen a whole lot of him so far today. It's the first time he's even been looked at. Hasn't had a ban or anything like that thrown his way. So matching up against the Cupid Bacchus duo lane could maybe be difficult for the Heimdall in the King Arthur final pick. We'll see if this is enough for Hex Mambo to bring this one back and take game number 3 and hold that #1 spot for themselves, or the Highland Ravens gonna take that one away. It all comes down to the ultimate game number 3 between the battle of the first seed, Highland Ravens and Hex Mambo. Who's gonna be the one to take it home at the end of the day? It all comes down to this.
I'm excited to see this one. Adapting, shifting up, taking a Mercury for himself means that really now adapting is going to be the one playing a much slower pace, but Johnny on Hunbots sure can get active a little bit earlier than Mercury. The second you get access to Fear No Evil, you're going to be able to make your impact known. You can at least burn away some of those beads pretty consistently. Will be a little bit harder pressed to find those opportunities, though, will Johnny, considering he's had to go towards beads in that first slot as opposed to the standard blink. Maybe concerned about the lockdown that Kana could bring. Not sure why Johnny would be worried about that, though. Kana doesn't leave lane. Maybe worried about the taunts from Silenced. But even then, the follow-up potential from a Yu Huang in the early, not exactly high. And for the most part, it would be Johnny initiating those fights. Either way, though, doesn't have the blink. That's the entirety of the analysis there. Instead, it is those beads, so defensive in that first relic slot. I imagine Zero's probably frustrated with the pace of the last couple of games, decided to go for a tried and true lane bully. Could be a different look. King Arthur is a bit easier to execute on than the Amaterasu. Just hit your abilities, you got more of them.
Well, at least had to square off early on. Only has access to a single of those abilities.
Yeah,
now
2
has
actually.
Hit level 2.
That's 4 now.
Double them up. Pretty easy for Zeros. We'll have 2 more than Kana at any given point. 3 more, technically, I guess, by the end of that one. But we'll see how Zeros can do on something that takes a little bit more, I'm not going to say a little bit more effort, but definitely takes a lot more going through. You have to hit a lot more buttons throughout your team fight on this King Arthur, but so far it's been able to net Zeros an early win. Kana doesn't quite have that sustain online yet for the Amaterasu to keep up.
No, but still has got plenty of potions to play with. 3 HP pots left and available. You can see the confidence in Kana's build, though, as opposed to what Zeros is elected to go for. Just the Bluestone with an HP Chalice and HP pots. Kana says, look, I've been dominating the entire set. I don't need a Chalice. I'm going to go ahead and just buy the potions and my Katana now and speed up my build ever so slightly. Could come back and bite him. Zeros is just going to keep doing this. Just dash at him, apply that damage. A complete inverse of what we've seen in the first 2 games.
Kana now hitting level 3. Might? Was wondering if he'd get access to that first ability to give himself some self-sustain, but either he hasn't gone it or hasn't opted to go to the point just yet. Meanwhile, dual lane, haven't got much opportunity to talk about them. Athena versus Bacchus, a pretty classic lane. Belly flop in. Heart Bomb will get the stun on towards 2. Not much more beyond there. Difficult to kill both of these gods very early on for the support role, especially a god like Bacchus.
Bacchus, one of the tankiest gods in the game. At level 20 is straight up the tankiest god in the game thanks to Chug and the protections that affords you constantly. So Trix tank, as of now, allowed to just continually get aggressive. Expect to see him do exactly that. Just jump in, try and land that belly flop. If it connects, E-Chrome follows up with Heart Bomb, and you've won the poke battle immediately from that. Whereas Athena, you kind of want a couple more levels. You need a couple of points into Confound so that your taunt actually has some time behind it, whereas Bacchus is getting the full value of his CC already.
Once that 5 hits, Intoxicate comes available to him, and then it just becomes one of the more annoying CCs in the game to really have to deal with, especially if you're playing one of those hunters. Purple buff cleared out by E-Chrome and Trix. Belly flop in by Trix. Stun towards Silence. Then a throw on Sap in the mid lane. Not going to get a whole lot of damage onto the Tiamat, but at least try and keep that pressure up. See if you can force the beads away from the Tiamat, but Sap realizes there's not a whole lot of kill pressure. Will hold on to the Relic for now. Trix Tank's playing very aggressive on this Bacchus. Not going to flop in to try and steal purple, unknowing where Adapting is on the map.
Yeah, also with Hog still held onto by Eye Silence, right? Like a flop in there, you're not beating Hog. So no way. It was incredibly high risk, pretty high reward, right? But not exactly worth the actual risk of it. So Trix Tank decides to back himself out there. Ultimates acquired by both junglers, Sonic Boom and Fear No Evil available. I think Johnny, a little bit more interesting of the two, actually will likely try and get involved somewhere. As Coast forced to teleport all the way back to his tower. A little bit of poke finds its way home there. Both teams taking a slow approach here in Game 3.
Can't get much slower than we had in game number 2 at the very least. We were sitting 20, 25 minutes into the game with only 2 kills. And the first of those happened very late into the early game. I believe it was about 10, 12 minutes before Sap was able to find a first blood. And then Sap found a second kill onto Adapting as well in a 1v1 matchup. So a very, very slow-paced game number 2 so far has been matched in game number 3. At least not for lack of trying, though. Trix Tank has been getting active on this Bacchus to try and put some pressure up against Coast, see if he can get beads away to try and maybe set up for Johnny to make a rotation over.
Yeah, Johnny, for now, still going to be farming up his own side of the jungle. And having decided to go down the Transcendence tree, yeah.
Man.
Well, let's play a game, J-Mac.
Okay.
What, Price is Right rules, whoever goes over loses.
All right.
What timer on the first Fear No Evil?
First
offensive Fear No Evil, not self-peel Fear No Evil.
Okay, first offensive one. All right. I'm going to say Transcendence is going to probably finish up around 7-8 minutes.
And you got to get that stack
He's
first, right?
Stack
You
that one
need
up,
the CDR.
Probably about another 7-8 minutes.
7 minutes a stack? You're bad at farming, bro.
Well, I mean, look, I know what it takes to get inside of a lane. I don't jungle as much, so I'm not sure on the jungle stacking time. Let's call it maybe like 5 to 6 minutes then in that regard.
Okay.
So looking like 13 to 14 minutes where he's got it.
13 to 14 minutes?
13 to... Yeah, he should be pretty close to maybe a Jotuns by that point. Yeah, I'll call it 14:30. 14:30 first offensive Fear No Evil.
I'll say 11.
11?
I think it's going to be the 11-minute mark. He's going to go for an offensive Fear No Evil. Again, if he is using it for self-peel, J-Mac and chat, we're not counting that one.
Right.
Or even to peel an ally.
Okay. So it's got to be, okay, I want to fight Angry right now. I'm going to use it. Also, we're not counting like for using it for objectives either, correct? Like he's using it like to
he is using it express purpose is to murk a dude. He's trying to ice him, you know?
All right, so I got 14:30 for my clock.
Okay. and I'm at 11.
All right, so we'll see who ends up being closer, if not at least going over in that regard. But never mind, it's even earlier. It's 6 minutes and 25 seconds
We both
for
lose.
Johnny, but doesn't get the kill. Instead, it's a turn on towards Zeros. Taunt brings him back in, but not enough damage just yet. Johnny proving us both wrong instantly. Will at least be able to keep his teammate alive.
Man, Johnny's such a psycho. We should have known. We should have known he was getting aggressive. Trixtank with a rotation in, pulls out that blue buff, and there's a lot of red members on the right-hand side of the map. They confirmed that, right?
Dude, supports are...
What was that silent with taunt?
That was with taunt,
Was a
dude.
confound confirmed? That is
That
like
was-
40 damage right now.
Well, I guess, what is he... Is he actually maxing confound first on
Surely
the
not.
Athena? Is he getting... I mean, it gets a lot of
He
damage.
surely is. Okay.
He is. 4 points into it. Dude, supports are good at confirming and stealing buffs. They're crazy.
Yeah, I guess so. I have to agree.
Tricks tank? He'll be fine. Pop that chug, keep himself alive with that passive. I silence though, saving the day once again, keeping a buff for his team on the right-hand side. Last game it was Tricks tank who was able to steal and secure buffs for his team. This time, it's Silence able to keep that blue buff up for Kana.
Yeah, Silence says, I can do what you can do better. Well,
do
he's halfway there, right? Well, halfway to matching.
Right.
Needs to get a third one if he wants to actually take the Confirmed King title away from Trixtank. Stacking across the board for both of these teams. Transcendence, Book of Thaw, Thieves, and Devourers gauntlets
Good
inside of
lord.
Hex Mambo, whereas Highland Ravens, yeah, it feels like we're back in Season 7. Warlock, Staff, Thieves, Devourers on the other side. So we're waiting on a couple of power spikes from both of these teams until they're actually getting the full value of these items. I wonder if Angry is going to decide to move in towards the Mirrodin like we had seen previously, or maybe even potentially double stack here. Considering the pace of both games 1 and 2, or perhaps just game 2, double stack might serve these mages pretty well. A little bit of HP from Warlock Staff is going to help Angry against this dive composition of Hex Mambo. Book of Thoth going to help out with the ranged artillery damage that a Tiamat brings, but maybe you also want a Warlock Staff if you're worried about adapting, kind of reprising the performance that we had seen from Johnny in the previous game.
Sonic Boom followed up by Defender of Olympus right after, adapting. Will strike first blood for the Highland Ravens. Getting the first kill of the game, 8 minutes, 40 seconds in. Highland Ravens strike early, and you can see the impact that they've been able to have. 1,300 gold and almost the same in experience up for their squad. Kana wants to try and get his blue buff. This time he's going to have to save it on his own accord. Will not do so. That is a steal by Johnny and Zeros, but Obelisk fully finished up by Hex Mambo as well, and Beads taken away from Sap in the mid.
Yeah, completely different look at the Soul Lane this time around. Not only with Zeros playing with more confidence on this King Arthur, but also we've seen a lot more presence from Johnny in the Soul Lane here in Game 3. Keeping Kana under check, making sure that he isn't allowed to just run away with a lane as he had in both of the previous games. Could bode well for Hex Mambo. But in showing that much presence on the right-hand side of the map, Johnny spent a little bit more time soaking up farm, which has still allowed Kana to get a slight experience lead.
Mid camps. Coast gets the teleport out just in time with the Bifrost and won't be stunned out by Tricks. And Beads still maintained by everybody on the Highland Ravens who does have them available to him. Still 2 minutes until Sap 7 gets his purification beads back. You imagine that's a perfect window of opportunity for adapting and Silence to maybe get active, try and punish this mid laner.
It is still difficult, right? Like, you can leap a Sonic Boom on reaction as Sap 7. You still have CC immunity and the quadrupedal stance as well from that ultimate, so it is an opportunity to be sure, right? Beads down, obviously going to be easier to kill them as opposed to when they're up, but still not simple.
Tricks tank finds the Intoxicate and the flop on towards Silenced. Dueling Dragons will shove Tricks tank around, and a Sonic Boom once again, but fear no evil this time to peel for the team. Not quite enough as Tricks tank does go down. Sap 7 able to return the trade out and make it a 1-for-1. No beats by Sap means they'll eat the full duration of that Confound, but be just fine. It's a 1-for-1 trade at the end of the day.
Yeah, I wonder if Trixtank had that Thieves full stacked. Maybe he's able to survive there, but instead, a pickup thanks to all that CC on the side of the Ravens. Vapor's Coast might be able to take this 1v1. It's not a 1v1, it's a 2v1. We jump it.
Athena here, and it's just a ring around the single rock that's there. Echrome taunts it in, and Vapor's Coast
Can't
once
help
again,
himself.
He's just got to do it every single time.
I wonder, do you think teams like strategize around that? They're like, all right, we should make sure Coast gets the kill because he's gonna have to stand still for a second afterward. get the taunt animation, the laugh animation out. Obviously not. Unfortunate situation for Echrome. Gets caught out on the map. Aggressively positioned, though. That's a fight that Echrome had decided to take, and one he needs to be aware of in the future. It's never a true 1v1 when there's this much global presence at the side of the Ravens. If it is an eye silence with Defender of Olympus, it's going to be adapting with the Sonic Boom. So this Cupid needs to play a little bit more wary on that side of the map, or at least have someone around and with him. If Trix Tank is there, maybe the fight looks a little bit different, but because he isn't, simple for the Ravens.
Wonder if it's just coded into Coast's game. Whenever the kill grants it to him, it just automatically runs the laugh for him.
It might. It's that consistent.
It seems like every time that we've tuned into him getting a kill, whether it's a solo kill or a 2v1 in that case, it's just been a laugh immediately after. But shows there's at least high spirits for the Hunter, for the Highland Ravens, and high spirits to be had. Nearly 2,000 gold up for the Highland Ravens. 12 minutes in, 3-1 on the kills, and 2 of those 3 at the hands of adapting with this Mercury. Rage built up, already has its first stack on it. Definitely a much quicker pace start for the Mercury in a Game 3 versus what we saw in Game 2 from Johnny.
Yeah, Johnny was sitting on 1 stack of Rage 23 minutes into Game 2. Already 1 stack available to adapting. As Porsche Coast uses the ultimate aggressively to close gap onto Echrome. Damage output good. 2 more autos is all it would have taken. 2 autos whiff, so Echrome maintains his life. A Porsche Coast wins handily in the 1v1, and the Highland Ravens win handily in the macro as they take the Pyromancer for themselves as well. And that's what I'm talking about a little bit earlier on in the set. Establish pressure in a side lane, force a rotation. That's what Coast does, and it gets them an objective.
Fear No Evil by Johnny, jump in place, but Beads and Aegis used by the Heimdall. And the Sacred Monkey Toss off the mark entirely. Vaporge Coast, who is literally standing at the tier 2 tower line not
Between
even a
them.
minute ago.
Between them.
Left and walked away just fine. Still lost his relic, so a win in that regard. But, I mean, when the enemy Hunter is 12 minutes in the game standing between 2 towers, gets to walk away, not a great sign for the duo lane so far for Hex Mambo.
Coast pressured out Echrome between towers, forced a 3-man rotation. The rest of his team take a Pyromancer, and he lived. That shouldn't be happening. Either defend the Pyromancer or kill Coast.
Well, instead it'll be a kill on the Trix Tank as the Dueling Dragon shove him into death. Adapting 1 hit away, but he gets the distance. And it's just a blink out as well. Sap 7 unsuccessful in being able to get the kill on towards the jungler. Puts a 4th one now for the Highland Ravens. 1 for Angry, at least in this early game start. Does have that Warlock finished up. 2,600 gold and 3K plus experience for the Highland Ravens.
Yeah, Adapting is setting a very good pace for himself here already. 3 affected kills of the 4, 75% participation, but 2 stacks on the Rage and rapidly approaching a finished Deathbringer at that. Do imagine we see Adapting slow down for the next couple of minutes, though, as we wait for those relics to come off of cooldown. Could be an opportunity for Johnny. Catch a Mercury in the jungle in the next 2 minutes with that Fear No Evil. Doesn't matter if he's got a whole lot of crit, if he's not allowed to swing it on you, and if you're feared, you absolutely aren't, Johnny. As well, Brawler Speed Stick, Transcendent stacked up, starting to look towards that Heartseeker. He's got a whole lot of burst. Keep your eyes on the Hunbots. Could be one way back in for Hex Mambo.
For Adapting. 80 seconds till Blink, 100 seconds till Beats. I think you're right to say that it'll be, at least to slow it down, but it kind of goes back to that conversation you brought up earlier where, you know, game number 2, neither jungler really wanted to get active. Game number 1, when the Ravens were playing active, when Adapting was making rotations and early fights for his team, they were able to dominate the map. It seems that Adapting has gone back to that playstyle here in game number 3, even on a god that is supposedly more late game slanted like a Mercury.
Yeah, it's been getting a little bit more involved, but I think it's more so his teammates have done the exact same. Angry's putting out a good deal of damage. Vaporous Coast back to his signature. I'm going to walk you down. I'm better at landing my autos playstyle as well. Has really created the space for Adapting to play like this out of the jungle. Whereas on the other side, Hex Mambo, your dual lane isn't exactly winning. Sap 7 isn't exactly winning pressure there either. Zeros has done a good job in the 1v1 up against Kana, but because he doesn't actually hit pay dirt, because he isn't actually able to shut down Kana at any point, even with the help of rotations from Johnny, it still has slowly led to the exact same place. All roads lead to Rome. All roads in this set seem to lead to a 2-level lead for Kana, which is established once more. Highland Ravens just in a better position all the way across the map. Johnny doesn't exactly have an easy avenue to gank. He doesn't have a lane that is a clear target.
Wait, Kana's out of the solo lane? What?
No,
What
he's just
what
taking
time
a.
is this?
It's a scenic route.
Okay.
Yeah.
His teleport was down. He was like, you know what? I'm just gonna come over, get some extra farm in mid, go back to solo. Okay.
That's
wait,
right.
now he's back in his rightful place, back in the solo lane. We'll see him in about 4 levels, maybe 4 or 5 minutes, until he comes back through. But does manage to get his Golden Blade, a Shogun's, and a Berserker's built up. So going towards that auto attack style for that solo lane. And we'll see whenever maybe Zeros tries to make a rotation out of this lane, try and get active for his team. He has been pinged out. So enemy team knows that he's around there, but it'll be a Scorpion for Hex Mambo trying to keep themselves afloat in this early game. 2K gold separating, not the end of the world even in this early game.
I think Adapting should be able to afford his Deathbringer, but instead actually pulls out the Gold Fury. Johnny nearby has Blink and Ultimate, but a couple of crits should secure the Fury before he even locks eyes with it. Highland Ravens sneak away with yet another objective, and if he couldn't afford it before, he definitely can now. Adapting on this back, gonna hit a massive power spike. Has a whole lot of kill potential all of a sudden. Squishy mid laner, Sav 7, no Warlock staff, means that 2-3 crits from Adapting will finish him off. Johnny doesn't exactly survive for the longest time either. Even Zeros to a certain extent with Sovereignty and Manicore Spike, Glad Shield as well, not exactly the tankiest. Keep your eyes on Adapting. Wouldn't be surprised if we see him get aggressive very soon.
For now, we'll just go ahead and grab his speed buff. We saw the Gold Fury taken a moment ago, so Highland Ravens able to strip a neutral objective away. Battle of the Bubbles between the supports. Both of those end up getting popped. One by the Belch from Trick Tank, the other the Taunt from Silenced. So that's the immediate defense of the supports taken away. Pyromancer started. Johnny goes in, gets the Fear No Evil, and 2 sets of beads instantly, but the Pyromancer does go over to the Highland Ravens. Khan about half HP after tanking that one up and taking the damage from Johnny, but Highland Ravens, again, grab themselves another objective.
I don't know, getting beads off of both Kana and Adapting. The second that Fear No Evil is back, and I realize Hex Mambo are playing at a deficit, but with the game continually bleeding out and with Highland Ravens scaling as hard as they are, maybe you force a fight on map. It can't be around the Fury, but we're going to be around that 19, 20 minute mark very shortly. I wouldn't be too angry to see Hex Mambo either group up, pressure a tier 1 tower, try and catch either Adapting or Kana with that Fear No Evil again, or even like a knock-up from Trick's Tank or Zero's ultimate as well. Plenty of CC on the side of Mambo to pressure those guys out. Just try and leverage it, force a fight. Because what we've seen is every single time those beads go down, Highland Ravens take their foot off the gas. If Adapting doesn't have beads, it's, I'm done. I'm not really fighting anymore.
Kana catches out Trick Tank in the jungle. Stun is good, and ult in from the support as well as just enough damage. Trick Tank, who'd used his blink to try and get in and grab that Scorpion away, then had the belly flop away. Didn't have his defenses available to him. So it's a quick pick onto the enemy support. Highland Ravens can rest on the laurels of the fact that they're able to find another pick and keep that pressure up across the map.
Yeah, I mean, with 20 seconds left on Trick Tank's respawn, there's not a whole lot you can do on map besides pressure one of these towers. Tier 1 tower could be a decent target, but that's not exactly the style we've seen from these guys. So instead, reset to neutral, spend the time while Trick Tank is dead to put your support ahead. That's generally what we do see. So Silenced will do exactly that now, about a half, maybe 3/4 of a level lead over Trick's Tank as they confirm all the contestable farm all the way across the map.
Do you have Highland Ravens still keeping that fight up? Kana's level 20 now. Maybe we see him leave the lane. Does he have enough gold for his starter? I think that's the ultimate question. Does he have... Oh, yeah, he's got plenty of gold in hand. So maybe now we see Kana
He's rich.
start rotating over. I mean, he was sitting on over 2K. Nope, never mind. Immediately back to the right. Will it just be to move the Trebuchet or stick in lane?
I mean, there's not much to rotate
He'll
to
stick
right
to lane.
now, right? Like, I mean, Gold Fury's not alive. Pyromancer's not alive. Highland Ravens have not shown any propensity to just, like, shove towers. We've seen multiple times in this set where Tier 1 towers survive to the 30 or so some odd minute mark, so it seems like towers are, hey, we got Fire Giant, now we push type deal, don't really want to risk it otherwise, so I'm not surprised to see Kana just go ahead and head back over to the solo lane, try and put some pressure on the Zeros, and we'll be able to do so much more easily this time around with all that additional sustain that Death's Embrace does afford you. Silence, though. Yikes. Tough. That's tough, man.
Yeah, unfortunate position for Silence to be in. A quick pause by the players as we jump into a quick little break between these guys there. Yeah, Silence probably not making it out of that one, and if you're on the enemy team, that is a win that you want to take at any opportunity, get any free kill that you can. assuming that he doesn't make it back by the time it goes through.
How do you feel about that? Because that does look like iSilence having some, like maybe some ISP issues. How do you feel about that? If you're on the enemy team, are you like, oh, okay, respectful?
If I'm in a casual game, sure, I'll let them live through. If I'm in a ranked or competitive game, I'm taking that free kill anytime that I can. Especially when we're 4,000 plus gold behind, I'm taking any opportunity I can get.
Here's the difference between you and I, J-Mike.
Uh-huh.
I relish these opportunities, right? I'll pinch you against a wall, wait for you to come back, and then kill you, so that I maximize you. I maximize the time that you've lost, right? You DC'd, you returned, now go to the grayscale. I don't want you returning and be able to walk out of base immediately.
So you're getting them to like 1 HP, just make them sit there
and
wait?
I'm keck Wing and laughing on stream. I'm like, money, 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 money. I don't care, dude. I want you to feel bad. I want you to be angry, because when you're angry, you play worse. I'm playing the whole mental game. I don't care if it's in a competitive match, a ranked game, a casual, or a 4 a.m. assault where you already had a DC. I'm doing it all.
Well, we'll see if the Athena does end up making it out of there. I don't imagine so. I gotta imagine that one doesn't end up. No.
So respectful.
They let him live.
Couldn't be me, bro.
Nope.
Wouldn't be me.
Nope. Way better than I am about that.
Yeah, that's crazy, guys.
That would have been a dead Athena.
That would have been a fire giant.
Yeah. That would have been a dead Athena, something else afterwards. At least for Kana, he'll be able to push up tier 1 tower. Keep things going for the Highland Ravens on the right side of the map. Okay, now the tower's gone, Kana. Surely you rotate over to get set up for Gold Fury.
Who is it this time?
Sure. Who's having problems now?
Well, we'll figure it out, right? I wonder, if it is now Hex Mambo having an issue, you think the Ravens let him live? Because even in this position, you let my boy live, I'm still murdering you, dude. And I'm hopping in your Twitter DMs and letting you know I did it too. Like, I'm ruthless. I'm not trying to do anything. Nobody died. Respect all the way across the board. Great sportsmanship over in EU.
Way better than what NA would have done.
No,
We would have.
Yeah, North Americans.
No.
Good luck. You lost the game. That's part of the match. Should have loaded in with better gear. Nice router, loser.
GG to you guys, but Highland Ravens still maintaining a 6,000 gold lead with the help of that tier 1 tower going down just earlier on. Oni Fury spawning in could be a perfect opportunity for Hex Mambo to maybe try and claw back in. All ultimates available for Hex Mambo, all ults up for Highland Ravens. Oni Fury going down quickly, Fields of Love and a Fear No Evil. Hex Mambo steal away the Fury. Kana lives through that. The Dueling Dragons able to separate the team fight out. Highland Ravens have lost the objective, are losing the team fight, and will smartly back away from Mambo.
So Mambo, in forcing so many back to base here, might be able to rotate directly to the Pyromancer. They've got timer on it, so could try and put some pressure there. iSilence, Vaporishkos, and Kana maintain their ultimates. No ultimates still held, aside from zeros on the side of Mambo, so maybe not really an opportunity to look at the Pyro, and instead, Fire Giant pulled out. Mambo's got to check, right?
Yeah. They have to. Trix is here, Blink is down, Johnny no ult. Zeros does have at least the stun of his ultimate. Through the realms used, Fire Giant stolen away by Hex Mambo. Another objective to the boys in red, but Johnny is the first casualty of the team fight. Zeros, half HP in the middle of 3. Should go down, but the Phoenix Fire just off the mark, and Trix Tank still trying to run away. This tanky King Arthur will only live for so long before Angry picks up the kill on that one. Trix Tank flops in place into his own death. A Fire Giant steal by Hex Mambo, but 3 kills for the Ravens.
Let that be a lesson, I suppose. No good deed goes unrewarded. Hex Mambo, with great sportsmanship, allow iSilence to live, and then the powers that be, the karmic powers that be, pay it back with a Fire Giant steal and a Gold Fury play. Regardless, though, Highland Ravens with a lead and with the committal positioning of Hex Mambo to steal away that objective are able to win out in the team fight immediately afterward. But taking a peek at the charts, can't imagine Hex Mambo are too upset with how that one really starts to pan out. With 3 dead, though, I'd expected the Ravens to, like, pressure a tower, maybe? Like, go to the mid tower or the left tower? No towers this time, so yeah, clean win for Hex Mambo.
Yeah, I mean, you lost 3. Sure, that sucks, but didn't lose anything else after that. All towers, aside from the right side tier 1 that fell way before that fight even broke out, all still standing. Fury was already down from the prior 5. Pyromancer was down as well, so Hex Mambo just take that 30, 40 seconds that they had to sit in the grayscale screen and count that as a win. Fire Giant as well on E-Chrome still, so they have their Hunter for tower push, and it's
Do
only
they push?
well, it's only tier 2s left. Maybe Hex Mambo push up one of those, but with the way that the minions are pushed around, doesn't seem too likely.
Yeah, I mean, you've got 2 entire minutes on Sap 7 and Echrome with the Fire Giant. A sustain composition as well, thanks to that Cupid. I would think they would push. There's literally nothing else to do on the map. They could just stagnate and say, hey, last Fire Giant dance went great for us. We could do it again, and this time we don't die, right? But you could put yourself in a better position for the next one by dragging down one of these tier 2 towers. Maybe he's just concerned about the fight potential. It's like 3,000 gold 25 minutes in, though. Experience is a non-factor. There's only 1 level difference between these 2 teams, regardless of what the chart will tell you. And it's in the support role. And it's Trix Tank on a late-game Bacchus with Spirit Robe and probably like a nearly maxed out Chug as well. So he's incredibly tanky. Yeah, I've talked myself into it. I'd like to see Hex Mambo group up and try and use that Fire Giant a little bit.
It's all come full circle. Should they push?
I think so.
Go through all the steps and the motions? Yeah, they probably should, but
it would just make it a little bit closer, right? Like,
yeah.
I'm not saying go for a Phoenix. I'm not even saying to risk it, right? Like, show up on a tower and see what the response is. If there is no response, back up. If there's a slight response, maybe you take a fight and the tower. If there's a massive response, go ahead, back up. Like, you know, I'm not saying walk in and just die like a lemming, but at least check, because if you do take a tier 2 tower as Hex Mambo, which is not incredibly risky, you at least close up that gold gap a little bit as you start to move in towards the next Fire Giant. But instead, we're spinning our wheels.
Well, for the time being, that gold lead that was being slowly pushed back by Hex Mambo's kind of plateaued itself, at least for the time being. Only 3K. And as we start approaching the 30-minute mark, that 3,000 gold really isn't all that significant. The experience lead means essentially nothing at this point, with everybody but supports hitting level 20 and Trix Tank only being 2 levels down in the support role, still just fine for himself, even opting towards a little bit of extra damage for himself on this Bacchus, going in towards that penetration tree. But with Hex Mambo not getting anything else off to that Fire Giant, I mean, nothing being done by Hex Mambo. There wasn't an objective to take. They secured their red buff, so that's something, I guess, but Hex Mambo, essentially all they did was just took that Fire Giant away so that Highland Ravens couldn't do anything with it.
Like a toddler in a sandbox when you see someone else playing with your toy and you're like, no, I want to play with that one, actually. And then they like leave it alone and you don't want to play with it. That's kind of what Hex Mambo did with that Fire Giant. They get it and they're like, oh well, I didn't actually want to use it.
Primal Fury, half HP, leashed by the Ravens. Picked back up by Kana. Typhoon the stun. Trix Tank finds 3 in the backline with the ultimate. Vaporish Coast, half HP. Barely makes out, but the Heart Bomb should be enough to take him out. Echrome credited towards the kill. And 1 gone from the Ravens. Hex Mambo can now move their way towards the Primal Fury. Silence gets a taunt onto Zeros, but Zeros does not care. Will instead walk even closer and allow his team to take the Primal.
And now Hex Mambo can start to walk over towards the Fire Giant, which is on the respawn. And they'll have 40 seconds to play with while Vaporish Coast is dead, one of the primary DPS sources of the Highland Ravens. All you got to do is get to the Fire Giant and not get picked. It is a very, very winning, very good position for Hex Mambo. But the Highland Ravens are showing presence here, 4-stacked. Maybe they like their odds in this team fight. Good taunt.
Get some damage onto Zeros. Echrome walks back through the fire, but silenced. Does not get through with that Defender of Olympus. He'll instead be sent back to base in a body bag while the Fire Giant is back up. Hex Mambo, with 4 surrounding and Sap on the way, have a 5 versus 3 fight around the Fire Giant. But now if Vaporish goes back alive, it'll be a quick rotation in from the Hunter. And even Zeros goes back. He's got teleport. He can get back in this fight pretty quickly while the rest of the team starts up Pyro.
87% sure that iSilence lives if he just keeps holding W there, right? Like, standing still to channel ultimate probably is what cost you your life. 20 seconds left on the respawn, exact same position Vaporish Coast was in. And Hex Mambo didn't pull out the Fire Giant. Difference is, Silence has actually got global presence, so should be able to join the fight very quickly. Hex Mambo finally pulling out that fire, and it's burning quick.
Kana is here, stunned. Before he can get into the pit. Fire Giant low. Fear no evil defensively. Hex Mambo get the fire. And adapting to the backline. Found a good Sonic Boom, but no follow-up. Instead, it's all the follow-up onto Zeros instead. As Coast grabs one, adapting gets another, but it's a 2-for-1 trade. Root sprint does find Johnny, who jumps over the wall. And it's only 3 left alive this time for Hex Mambo. Better than the last Fire Giant, where they stole and only had 2 alive, but they lost it on E-Chrome, who's probably the best member to keep that buff.
Yeah, I wonder what the value trade is there, right? Like, yes, you do have more Fire Giants, but losing it on your Hunter means your opportunities to siege should be mitigated a bit. Plus 30 seconds, synced respawn timer on Zeros and E-Chrome. Should allow you to keep pushing? No. All right, we're going to reset
Should.
that one.
Keyword should.
I thought for certain we're getting at least a tier 2, right? Like, Johnny doesn't even have ultimate. You know that. You watched him use it on all of you. Fear no evil, the best teamfight tool that's still alive, wasn't quite there. And your ADC was up. Highland Ravens, no risk. We ain't pushing unless there is a bonfire on our belts, okay? If the Fire Giant ain't there and it ain't purple, I don't want it. We are going to play defensively, and we are going to get the next fire, and then we're going in. I am now in sync. I have synced up with the decision-making process of the Highland Ravens. I understand now. I'm with you. I will not make a mistake again. I know what they're going to do.
Now what about Hex Mambo, though? Because Hex Mambo had 3 with
I look, man, I can only get with one of them.
It took you a while to get to the Ravens. It took you till game 3 to get to the Ravens. You'll need another game 3 to get to Hex Mambo. But Hex Mambo with 3, having Fire Giant. One of those not being E-Chrome. It seems that they're at least willing to put a little bit of pressure towards the left side of the map. Even Zeros rotating in towards mid and heading that direction. Could see some pressure put on this tier 2 tower. Finally from Hex Mambo to get themselves grouped up. E-Chrome the only one showing face on the map. Maybe Porsche Coast trying to keep himself a little bit further back. But Zeros is pushing all by himself in the mid. It's going to take a while for a King Arthur to get that push going in a 4v1 or a 4v4 on this side of the map. Yeah, Zeros definitely isn't pushing when there's a Mercury there. No chance for the Soul Laner to get any pressure on that tier 1 or tier 2.
Distracting the Mercury is pretty valuable, though. Zeros is less impactful in the team fight than adapting is, right? Like, the massive crit potential, the one-shot potential that adapting brings is a little bit more than the inexperienced solo, like, backline dive that Zeros does. So even in just keeping adapting towards the center of the map, so long as Zeros doesn't die, I'd argue he's done his job and then some. Smart switch up, though, from the Ravens. Send Kana over. He's got a lot of experience beating up Zeros.
Bubble for bubble on the supports. Tier 2 tower to the left side. Goes to Hex Mambo. They got more done with this Fire Giant buff with having one more person. So there's the mindset there is more Fire Giant equals more potential to push. So at least able to grab tier 2 tower. But how much more can they get? It's only 1 minute left on the buff. Pyro's down. Gold Fury's about to come back up. Maybe rotation to that side of the map for Hex Mambo. Grab that objective and get set for the right side. Who knows?
Can we get a look at gold in hand for everybody, right? Let's see.
Not much.
Yeah, it's not a whole lot. So Gold Fury is not, like, really the difference maker. You're going to upgrade some of these relics, I suppose. Trix Tank will get, like, a tier 1 item. Isolant's actually full build already. Nope. No, he tricked me. He's got a tier 1 in the middle of his build as opposed to the end of it. Everybody loves that.
Oh, yeah, he didn't finish that blade.
Yeah, everybody really likes that Isilance. Thank you very much, man. Yeah, I just don't imagine that a vanilla Gold Fury is super valuable right now, but it is pretty risky to take a fight in the jungle for both of these teams. Maybe you heat check it. All right, we step up to Gold Fury. Nobody's here. We got it. Awesome. I wouldn't defend it. I feel like the risk is just so high. Whoever gets there first should just get it. And that's exactly how it goes down.
Gold Fury to Hex Mambo. Back's being channeled by nearly everybody, except for Zeros, who's just going to casually stroll. Now he'll finally get his. Actually, it's E-Chrome who stopped his back to go for a purple buff instead, while the Lizards will actually push up in the left lane from Sap 7 to maybe put a little bit more pressure towards that Phoenix. And now with everybody going back on the Highland Ravens, still 40 seconds until that Fire Giant has respawned and crashed down onto the map. But with the game as even as it is, and with the relic situation the way that it is, I mean, it's only a teleport down for Kana. Teamfight really could be the deciding factor between these teams unless we end up going to another 5+ minute Fire Giant dance.
And a 5+ minute Fire Giant dance would favor Hex Mambo because E-Chrome's got heals. That's the extent of it. Highland Ravens, I think, are pretty dependent on a initiation from Ice Silenced. Kana, if he eats that knockup, just dies. So fortunately for him and his team, able to avoid it with that dash. I'm keeping my eyes on Ice Silence for the Highland Ravens, and I'm keeping my eyes on Johnny on the other side. Fear No Evil and Confound can win team fights on their own.
Silence does channel Defender of Olympus to get back to the team fight as he was, helping with a push on the left. Angry will keep up pressure on the right side, dealing with some of the minions that have spawned in there. Pyromancer back, but not really the main objective that either two teams want to fight against. Bubble's still up for both of the supports. Have not upgraded those Magi's anything beyond. Trickstank goes in, finds 3 with the ultimate, belly flop off the mark, and instead tries to find a stun on the silence, where the bubble keeps him alive. Kana ults to get away, and a Fields of Love does not find a whole lot of value. Only relic taken away during that fight off the Highland Ravens was the beads from Kana.
So now, what can you do with positioning on map? Silence still playing pretty far forward here. Angry charged up Dow, but it's the Fire Giant pulled out in the face of Hex Mambo.
Ravens started out. Silence pulled away. Typhoon chasing in. Johnny wants the Fear No Evil, finds against Kana and Silence. Not the ideal targets, but it at least separates Kana from the team for just a moment. Half HP on the 2 frontliners. Coast can sustain back up with that Devourer's Gauntlet. But now Hex Mambo have pushed the Highland Ravens back. We have once again returned to a stalemate. This time, it's a couple of blinks on the side of Hex Mambo stripped away for a set of beads off a Porsche Coast.
Yeah, I agree with the decision from Silence there to head back to base. When you're at like 33% HP, you'll get your dash taunt, but you're going to die. Like, you taunt them, that means they're landing all their autos on you, so you're just legitimately going to melt there. So sending Silence back, very smart. Could have been an opportunity for Hex Mambo to pull, but they don't have the perfect vision that we do on the cast, so don't realize that it was actually a double back of a Porsche Coast and Silence. Kana, significant power spike, Elixir of Defense hit, and Johnny might be caught out.
Beads a little late there, does jump out, and Kana to the backline, wants to find Johnny, but can only get E-Chrome instead. Defender of Olympus gets out the Fields of Love, only catches Kana with it. Heart Bomb thrown in, Dueling Dragons do not find the CC that they were looking for Angry. And now the Highland Ravens, after pushing E-Chrome back out, E-Chrome does have some sustaining kit, but it's the Ravens pulling the enhanced Fire Giant. Angry forced up into the flight. It's only adapting, punching the Fire Giant right now. Coast will jump back in. Can Mambo steal another one? No, Highland Ravens get it. But Silence will go down. Adapting falls behind, and Vapor's Coast as well. A 3-piece in trade of the Fire Giant. It could be a 4th easily when Angry lands back down. A blink in and a belly flop from Trickstank. Angry goes down to Sap. Kana, the last one, standing against 5 of the Hex Mambo. The dash will get him away, but 4 gone. And Hex Mambo can push up the right side.
Heavy commitment from the Highland Ravens. Again, just doing the Fire Giant in the face of Mambo. I realize Johnny's poked out, but it doesn't take him too long to rotate back through, and he does exactly that. Kana has a lot of experience beating up on zeros, but maybe not the entirety of Hex Mambo.
Ult is available. Dashes in, finds a Silence on a 3. Ults, but he's got a Heart Bomb on top of him. Does find a stun against 2, but you need it on all 5. And Hex Mambo have turned this one down after going down in game number 1. It brought it back for a 2-0 reverse sweep and a 2-1 to win out the set and be your number 1 EU SCC team.
And it's worth noting again, weakened Hex Mambo, by the way. That's not their standard roster. Deathwalker taking a week off, Zero's moving roles as well, Sap7 subbing in towards mid. That is wild, considering the circumstances that they were forced to play into against the other previous first seed.
And this isn't the first time that Hex Mambo have done it either. I mean, we go back to Masters Phase 2. You have Johnny playing on ping, so weakened in that regard. You have Trickstank not even there. It was Rotwin stepping in for a sub on that team. It just goes to show the tenure that Hex Mambo has as a full unit. No matter who is stepping in for their squad, no matter what role apparently these guys are playing, Hex Mambo have what it takes to hold out and still be this powerhouse of a UU team.
They do, man. And it's team fight decision making. You can poke fun all you want. You know, they played passive, obviously, but when opportunities were literally perfect, they were always there, right? And there's credit due to be able to put yourself in a position to optimize on those opportunities, and they did so beautifully throughout this set. Every Fire Giant they went for, barring maybe like 1 steal or 2, was clean. The team fights were clean as well. The target selection, I think, very impressive from Hex Mambo too at that. Realizing even in that last fight, there was a clear decision from Hex Mambo. Look, we're going to lose Fire Giant if we don't go in now, but the fight looks really good. Just let Adapting fight it for 10 seconds or however long he is, and we'll fight everybody else. Sure, Ravens got the fire, but it cost him the game.
This is One of the first, that was actually the first Fire Giant, one of the first objectives the Ravens were able to get for themselves, and they end up losing. I don't know, maybe let Mambo keep stealing those objectives. He might win some stuff after that, but 29 minutes in, I mean, Zeros was actually winning the early game, and that's something that was kind of a shift from what we'd seen in game 1 and 2, where Zeros was being pushed under tower, being bullied constantly by Kana.
No repeat Zeros 3 times in a row.
Well, he did end up kind of losing the lane a little bit later. It was like a level or so down there, but still at least maintained for the first 15 or so before that ended up happening.
Yeah, he had the opportunity to actually play a lane bully and got some help from Johnny over the lane, so a significant difference from Zeros in game 3 as well. Loved what we saw from SAP 7. The Tiamat, very consistent for them, just always applying that damage from a range. Felt like he was almost never under risk either. Reflected in the death column, by the way, goose egg, in a very long game.
I wonder what the damage count looks like for SAP 7.
Wonder no longer.
Last game, oh, it's not quite the damage values that game 2 had. I think it was like 50-something thousand from Angry, but this time SAP 7 still top of the damage chart, 25K for the Tiamat. Pretty consistent damage across the board for the couple of the carries there. I mean, 25, 23, and then even 23 for Zeros on the King Arthur into the solo lane. But in the end, it's Hex Mambo. Been running undefeated all throughout this phase. Same with Highland Ravens, but when you throw 2 undefeated, only one of them comes out on top. This time, it is Hex Mambo to be your #1 seed, moving out of phase 3 and moving towards that playoff stage.
Yeah, I wonder as we start to move in towards playoffs and these SEC teams get the opportunity to play against the other region or the SPL, how that's going to reflect on the meta that they've developed, right? We saw from Hex Mambo in the most recent excursion they had with the SPL that they adapted very quickly to standard meta drafts, but once they went back home to EU SCC, they went back to their tried and true bread and butter. I'm curious, man. I always love opportunity to see SCC teams play against SPL teams or inter-region SCC matchups as well, just to see how that meta starts to shake up.
Well, congrats to Hex Mambo for securing your #1 seed. Let's take a look, though, at the schedule and the standings to see what's still left for the rest of today. One more matchup in EU, Aru Scorpions and Niflheim Wargs will be squaring off for our second set of the day. And then for the back half, Athenian Sages and Ansi Weavers, and the Shibalba Storm and Yomi Tanuki for our North American region. And as I mentioned at the top of the day, but I'll reiterate here since it has been a couple of hours since we've had that point, the last 2 matches will be thrown after the SPL. That'll be done by our community broadcast team, so make sure you tune into those to see the last couple of matches between the North America and EU. The Hex Mambo guarantee themselves #1, Highland Ravens guaranteed #2, but now the Aru Scorpions and the Wargs, they're going to actually be fighting out for what can potentially be that #3 spot. The Niflheim Wargs find a win. They put themselves up to 2 and 3, push the Scorpions down to 2 and 3. And then it comes down to the Gladiators and the Ferrymen to see if the Gladiators can maybe boost themselves up, find a win out there. We could have a very contentious 3rd through 5th place there.
Yeah, potentially some tiebreakers maybe, unless
Maybe
head-to-heads line up perfectly. But how often does that happen? You know, this is a very exciting time for the European SEC, especially considering how close we are to Worlds.
Being this close to Worlds, being this close to the playoffs. Because remember, for all of these teams, all 6 of them will qualify to their playoffs. It's going to take place in December, but it'll also be with the #1 and #2 SOC teams joining into that mix there. So could cause some shakeups there, but when we move from phase 2 to phase 3, even going through kind of that relegation period, none of the teams from either region did get knocked down by the SOC. So it's going to take quite a bit of powerhousing from the SOCs to maybe stand a chance up there. But that's it for set #1. We got one more EU set coming up right after this break, so stick around. We'll be back in just a few minutes.